on any matter related to board responsibilities, and our phones are open at 860-665-8736.
My name is Mady Kenny. I live at 53 Crestview Drive. And I'm just here to say that last night at the town council meeting, I've always been proud of Josh, but I was absolutely amazed at his presentation last night in explaining how monies in the Board of Ed can and cannot be moved. He was intelligent, clear, concise, articulate, and I just wanted to let you know publicly what I said to him last night. It was really amazing. He spoke off the cuff and even wound up with 2 extra seconds he didn't have to use. Thank you.
Not seeing any phone calls and no further public participation. We have no old business, so we'll move on to new business. The first part of new business is standing committee information items. There were 2 curriculum committee meetings on January 24th and January 31st. I believe that we already talked about one of them at the last meeting. Mrs. Guyan, if you want to share what they were briefly.
I believe we already spoke about both of them.
Did we speak about both of them?
Yeah, we got an update. Well, maybe we didn't talk about social and science. We met with the we talked about the implementation of the new social studies curriculum and how it's going and the changes that the teachers are seeing, and it seems to be going pretty smoothly. The kids are enjoying it. They've seen a lot of great things there. And then the new science curriculum they've been working on writing, and our new, please remind me of her name, Jenna Spiller. She was wonderful, so enthusiastic. I was thinking, man, I would like to take some of these classes. So just talking about the new way that they're going to be teaching the science classes was pretty exciting. She did a wonderful job. They have a lot of neat things coming up, and as that program begins to, as it is implemented over the next several years, I think it'll be pretty exciting for students and parents alike.
Any questions for the curriculum committee on what happened at that meeting? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our student reps who are back with us, and take it away, guys.
Good evening, everyone. To start, we will talk about athletics. 2 of Newington's athletes were named New Britain Herald Athlete of the Week in the month of January. We are very proud of Ashanti Frazier and Olivia St. Remy, both on the women's basketball team. And the basketball team has also qualified for the state tournament.
Now moving on to things for Newington High School, registration for classes for the 2018-2019 school year closed on Monday, and students used the new online program of studies to find courses that they wanted. It was a lot easier to locate courses, and I'm glad that the school has taken another step towards being more environmentally friendly and towards eliminating paper. On Monday, sophomores attended the annual all-day Truth About Hate program. I myself was a student facilitator, and I can say that I really did enjoy it, and the class was very receptive to the activities that we did and to eliminating hate in our school. On February 5th, student facilitators, including myself, attended an all-day training session that pushed us not only to identify hate in others, but in ourselves as well. We were encouraged to open up about our experiences with hate, and everyone was incredibly supportive. I was definitely reminded of how inclusive and diverse our student body is, and it brought a big smile to my face to know that students of all backgrounds are welcomed at NHS.
Mrs. Rodriguez, a Spanish teacher at the high school, will be assisting in conducting a Crayons for Cancer event, which will be taking place on Saturday, February 17th. Students will be volunteering to sort and peel crayons, which will then be reshaped into fun shapes. The money we raise from selling these crayons will replenish family funds and treasure chests, or prize bins, if you will, at children's hospitals nationwide. In addition, yearbooks have gone on sale to seniors. The yearbook committee worked very hard to create an amazing display and snapshot of the senior class. Students have recently voted on class superlatives, and the yearbook committee is also accepting submissions for the Candid page. A fundraiser to support NHS's Project Graduation was held on February 10th. The origination received credit from donations that were brought at 10 a.m. to Savers on the Berlin Turnpike.
3 students from NHS, excuse me, 3 students from NHS won awards at the statewide Scholastic Arts Competition. Their work was put on display at the Scholastic Art Show at the University of Hartford Art School Gallery until January 28th. Congratulations to Louis Sierra and Olivia Ronca, who both won the Silver Key Award, and to Stephanie Kubish, who won the Gold Key Award. Because of her award, Stephanie and her work will now go on to compete on the, on the national level.
As we mentioned in our last report, students in grades 9 through 12 will participate in Kindness Week this month, with activities taking place each day centered around kindness. The event will be truly school-wide, as leaders and advisors from the classes, National Honor Society, DECA, and Student Council will be planning activities for the week. The class of 2021 will be writing random acts of kindness on Post-it notes, which will be distributed to 20 random homerooms. The idea is to have the act completed by a student, and then the person on the receiving end of the kind act will be encouraged to pay it forward. The class of 2020 will be sending a little gift around with a note about the importance of kindness. The class of 2019 will be providing packages of Post-it notes to each homeroom, where students will write positive, motivating, and inspiring statements and place them throughout the building. Students will be able to keep the Post-its that they see around the school if it inspires them or speaks to them in any way. The class of 2018 will have students decorate rocks with positive quotes and pictures to be placed around the playgrounds and facilities at the elementary and middle schools. When a student finds a rock, they will be encouraged to decorate their own kind rock and hide it. The National Honor Society will distribute buckets and slips of paper to each homeroom, where students will write when their buckets were filled, or in other words, when they experienced an act of kindness. DECA will be distributing poster boards to each homeroom for students to write any promise they will complete to follow the Because I Said I Would challenge. Career Services will provide homerooms with compliment cards, which will encourage students to write compliments down to give to another student, particularly one who they may not communicate with often. Student Council has made cards with kindness challenges, which will be distributed to every student and staff member. These challenges are anticipated to be completed, and participants will be able to drop their challenge card in various boxes. At the end of the week, 3 prize winners will be picked randomly from the drop boxes. Lastly, the Student Council officers will be making welcome baskets for new students as of the beginning of the 2017-2018 school year to show what our school has to offer and how they can get involved.
The Men's Chamber Choir, including myself, performed at the Newington Police Department in honor of Master Police Officer Peter J. Lavery. Drama Club, moving on to the Drama Club, rehearsals for Beauty and the Beast have been going very well, and we were very excited to show you all of our hard work. Tickets go on sale tomorrow on nhsdrama.booktix.com and at the box office in the main lobby at the high school. The show opens March 15th at 7 p.m. with additional shows on the 16th and 17th at 7 and the 17th at 2.
Pertaining to the elementary schools, Ruth Chafee's PTA will be hosting a movie fundraiser in their gym on February 22nd, and the John Patterson Helping Hands Club and school families are hosting a book drive from February 12th through March 2nd.
And for the middle schools, parents, guardians, and students were invited to participate in an internet safety workshop. I think it's fantastic how now adults and students are being taught about internet safety, and our community encourages the use of technology and the internet in our everyday learning. That's it.
Thank you. Do we have questions, comments from board members regarding the update? Mrs. Guyan?
I am super happy to hear about the Kindness Month activities. That sounds pretty awesome, and I love that there's just so many little ways for people to be involved and to experience kindness through that program, so I think that's awesome. I'm looking forward to purchasing my tickets for Beauty and the Beast. I have heard a lot of great things about it. People are very excited about it. Whenever anyone talks about it, they're like, oh my God, it's Beauty and the Beast, you have to go. So I'm pretty excited. And I was able to actually go to that internet safety program, and it was eye-opening, to say the least. And I think the kids are going to do a program at the middle school also in conjunction with that, and I hope they take notes, because I was taking a lot of notes. There's just so much out there, so it was very informative, and the presenter was fantastic. So if anyone gets the opportunity to see him again, I would definitely recommend it.
Dr. Braverman?
Great job, you guys. You do a great update for us. We hardly have questions, so that's a good thing. Very comprehensive. I was just wondering if there's a team going to DECA on March 6th, if you know who they are and how that's all working out.
I'm also someone who's competing on March 6th, but I don't know how many people exactly are going to the competition, but I know there are many students involved in role plays. There's also like an essay that you can write and submit that. There's like an innovation plan is what it's called. So basically, I think I don't know too much about that one because I'm personally doing a role play with one of my friends, but you have to come up with like an invention, I guess, or an innovative plan, and you have to write. I think there's there's like a 10-page essay, and there's different lengths of essays depending on which topic you choose. But I know there are many students who are involved in DECA, and hopefully we have a lot of people going to ICDC this year, which is the national level.
It's actually, they're not just an essay. There are several different categories. They're written events that you can enter. And so it takes very time consuming. It'll take about 3 months to conduct. You have to actually conduct a project and then do the research behind it and put out a report. So I don't know how many written events we'll be entering, but the role play isn't different. It's not a written event.
Yeah, the role play is you can do it individually or with a partner, and you are given a certain amount of time to come up with a plan to basically pretend that you are a manager or someone speaking to someone of a higher level. So it kind of introduces students to interviews and meetings with those of a higher level.
They give you a problem, and then you have to solve the problem and
Exactly.
present it to a team.
Exactly.
Yeah, very good way to learn to think on your feet. Good. I'll be there, so I'll see you guys.
Further board member questions, comments? Have you finished course selection for next year?
Yes, we have.
Matt,
Yeah.
because Prachi, you're done, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I have. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
What's and this may tie into other discussion items, but what's kind of the buzz around school about people selecting STEM academy related courses?
Oh, definitely. Everyone is very excited. I will definitely say that. The counselors made a point to tell everyone that if you don't sign up for the classes but you are interested in them, it would be quite a shame if nobody signed up and then therefore the classes wouldn't be able to go forward. So I think people really took that to heart and did sign up and are definitely very excited to be involved in the STEM courses and in the academy courses, especially those who signed up originally last year and unfortunately didn't get the chance to this year. They're very excited too.
And so, do you feel like everyone kind of knows that it's possible that the same thing could happen as happened last year, unfortunately?
Definitely. And the counselors have also made a point of telling students that there's only so much that the students can do. Of course, if there's many people signing up, that's something that everyone would take into consideration. However, things happen, and it's very possible that the same thing that happened last year could happen this year, and students are prepared for both of those things. And I think the academy students who have registered for a lot of academy courses, they have put on several, more than a few alternative classes as a means in case that doesn't work out.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Do you see the same kind of enthusiasm as last year?
Definitely.
Great.
Definitely.
Well, I'm glad to hear that at least. Anything further from the board? Okay, we will move on to item 1 under new business, which is definitely the agenda item all year long that has the most slashes in it. Discussion, possible adoption, adjustments, possible transmittal of the 2018-19 Board of Education budget to town manager. So, well, Mrs. Droz, I'm going to start. I will certainly explain that, and thank you for reminding me to remind the public who's tuning in this week but didn't last week. So what happens with the budget is there's several different steps that the board takes before the town manager has the chance to do what she wants to the budget and present the town budget. So right now, the superintendent has presented his budget to the Board of Education. We have opportunity to discuss that budget. At some point, no matter what our feelings, we must adopt the superintendent's budget as our own. Then it becomes the Board of Ed's budget to do what we want with it. Then comes the second part. We are able to make adjustments in the budget that we have adopted. So we take things out, we can add things in, and we wind up at a final number that we're comfortable with. We then vote to transmit the budget to the town manager. The next steps are the town manager presents her budget to the town council, and then the town council makes their adjustments, and that's the final word. So after the town council makes their adjustments and sets the final budget for the year, we then come back around the table, and unless something different happens for the first time in 7 budgets for me, we then make additional cuts to get down to whatever number the town council has given us in their budget. So at our last meeting, this was the same agenda item because we have the option, if we wanted to move forward with adopting the budget, with adjusting the budget, and then transmitting the budget. It's been my experience over the years that we should take the time to discuss these items, to digest them, to come back the next week to have questions answered, and take as many meetings as we want to discuss all of this so that we can get input from the community, and then go forward either this coming week, the 21st, or the 28th, with all 3 in the same night. So we adopt, adjust, and transmit generally in the same night. I was planning on starting with one of the reasons why I think it's inappropriate to adopt, or adjust, or transmit tonight, which is the health benefit fund. So we all know that we get a number from the agent of record, who, yes, Emily, is a real person. And when we get that number, a final number from the agent of record, we know exactly how much we have to put into our budget book in health benefits. So that's one of the largest numbers that's in our budget book. At some point, we get a number post-January 1. That's the number that's in Dr. Collins' presentation to us. Generally, after February 1, we get a new number, because the way that the number works is they take part of the year that we've had so far from July up to February, and then they look at last year's returns from February until the end of June, and they kind of combine those into a trend and determine what we need to put into health benefits for next year. There is, of course, because why not, a slight complication this year in that we still do not have a final number from health benefits. There is a memo in our white folders this evening that will go up online tomorrow, and that memo describes what's going on. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Jacomowitz, who can explain a little more clearly what's going on, when we expect to get the health benefits number, what we expect that to come in at, and all of that kind of stuff, and we can ask some follow-up questions.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Okay. The process with the agent of record has a good degree of give and take in it during the course of the discussions. Besides the hard dollar trends that are experienced, the size of the group that is being insured needs to be considered. The migrations of individuals from one type of plan to another need to be considered, and the financial implications of copay amounts and the cost of the plan relative to what it was the prior year. For example, we have a number of individuals stepping out of the Century Preferred plan into the high deductible plan. The new plan is at a lower rate structure, where we also have the obligation to fund the deductible, and the copay will not be what it was with the other plan. So there's a number of calculation items that go into the overall fixing of the number. This year the plan is running fine. On the Board of Ed side, it's predominantly the high deductible plan. As of the end of this year, everybody who is employed by the board will be on high deductible. Some of the ATs and AFSCME people are not over yet, but that will be the change for next year. And as a result of that, we saw a significant change in our population this year. Last year, our contract count was 506 employees under benefits. As of right now, it's 472. And it seems like a good portion of those were retirees who chose not to continue coverage with the high deductible plan, or aged out, where we did not have the obligation to cover them anymore. So when we factor in rate increases against the change in the count, it comes up to the 5.7% number that the agent is standing on at the moment. Okay? This actually should be viewed as essentially a 12.4% increase in the rate, offset by a 6.7% reduction in headcount to net to a 5.7%. Because of the transition of one plan, old plan style to the new plan style, Mr. McCluskey wasn't absolutely certain of where we needed to be yet, and he felt another month of trend information would be very valuable to be able to come up with the right number. Because just like we would certainly like to go in at a very responsible number, we certainly don't want it to be too high where it will by unintended consequences, create a very large health benefit credit the following October. And also, we have to balance that with the needs of the town in general to properly fund the reserve to make sure that, you know, everything stays stable, whether claims are having a good year or whether claims are having a bad year. So for a number of 5.7% right now, there's no adjustment needed for our current budget because that's where we stood, where I built it as of a month or so ago. And assuming it moves down to the 3.7% number that Mr. McCluskey has presented in column 3, we would be able to yield a savings of $180,414. And certainly, hopefully, I will be successful at some arm twisting to get that number even lower, but I can't count on that at this point.
And so I just want to reiterate the last point that Lou made, which is that right now the dollar amount is not, the predicted dollar amount is not going down as much as we anticipated, for obviously one of many reasons that go into these calculations. So it's all of our hopes that it will go lower, but at this point, the agent of record thinks that our most likely scenario is that we'll be able to take off about $180,000 from our budget, which is not the 1% we were kind of hoping for. And last year our health benefit number was actually negative. We had to put in less for health benefits than the year prior, and this year the agent of record thinks it'll be a 3.7% total increase, which is still an incredibly low number. Our numbers for health benefits have been incredible for the last 4 or 5 years, since the last 4 years or so since the last contract. But unfortunately, it may not help us get down as low as we thought we could, just from a health benefits number changing.
And Mr. McCluskey also stated he anticipates having this resolved within a week. So certainly by next week's meeting, I would expect that we would have his final number to move forward with.
And so that's the main reason why I said not a great night to adopt, transmit, all of that stuff, because we may be able to lower the number, without making any sacrifices to board operations, just because the health benefits number comes in lower than the original number included in Dr. Collins' presentation. Any questions on the health benefit number, how that works, the process, Mrs. Guyan?
The number that we get next week will be the final number, or final for now?
Final for now. Oh, we always have the ability to add additional months of experience. So the next number we'll get will have January included. When the board budget and town budget are finalized in April is typically when they'll finalize the deal for the health insurance for the following year. So they will definitely have February information available and possibly March, depending on exactly the date. And by elimination of trend estimates in the health insurance cost factoring, that always brings the rate down.
Okay, so the number that we're going to have next week will be the final number that we'll have access to
Right.
before we need to transmit.
For
But then
budget
as the
deliberations,
process continues,
It may get better, but
Okay.
Not guaranteed.
Right, thanks.
Do you recall if in the last handful of years it has changed from the time we've transmitted to the town to the time of the town's adoption of a budget?
Nothing specific. Maybe 3 or 4 years ago, it was looked at the early part of April. But I'd have to go back and double. I would be speaking without really a fact base at this point.
Okay.
It has been. What I've seen it happen in prior years is after the fact, where the final number comes in after budget is done. It'll actually come in a bit lower than was actually built into the budget. But that hasn't happened for a few years.
Okay. But even if it were to change after the fact,
Mhm.
the magnitude of it would be much smaller than the
Correct.
magnitude of this
Oh,
next
yes,
one
yeah.
that we get.
Right.
Okay. Further questions, Dr. Braverman?
Lou, the more people that have trended or gone to the high deductible plan, we get less money back from health benefits money because of the high deductible?
No, the rating structure for the high deductible plan is less expensive because you have a larger deductible that a participant has to be responsible for. That helps the overall cost of everybody. It's probably 7-8% lower, maybe even 10% lower than the Century Preferred plan we had in place. And it does have those features built in for cost containment, and also as a consumer of health services, gives the participants the opportunity to shop, save their deductible funding for other purposes, and just be better consumers.
Okay.
Further questions on health benefit numbers, money? Okay. Moving along, other discussion items for budget time? We do have some more responses to questions if anyone wants to start with some of the answers we got after last week.
I can respond to Emily's question about the reduction in the repair account for the transportation department. It was a $20,000 reduction in the repair account, and that was primarily, I had forgotten about it, we had purchased I can't believe I've forgotten about this, a gator. Wasn't even sure what that was. We purchased a gator so that we could not have to send our buses to DATCO every 90 days for what's called an A service. So by this piece of equipment, because we don't have an appropriate garage, we were able to take the stuff on this gator around to the buses, perform the A service ourselves, and save about $20,000. So that's where that came from. So that's an annual savings for a $7,000 purchase, one-time purchase.
And what does that A service entail?
So an A service is required by the motor vehicle department, and it checks all different parts of the bus, and it has to be, every part has to be inspected, and you have to certify that you've done that, and we weren't able to do that before. So by putting, I guess, all the tools on this thing and going from bus to bus, they can do it here without having to send it off to DATCO to do.
And every bus has to be checked once a month?
Every 90 days.
Every 90 days.
It has to be
3
inspected
months.
every 90
Okay.
days, yeah.
Thank
And
you.
it's about, I say it's about $115, $159 every time. That about right, Lou? Yeah.
Any follow-ups on that topic? Okay. I did want to point one thing that's not in our budget books, but it was a budget-related question. I had asked about the Title I and Title III grants, federal grants that the town receives for our schools that qualify under free and reduced lunch. These funds come in and we're allowed to use them for very specific purposes. This is how a lot of our intervention program, it seems, is funded at these schools. So we fund 1.5 reading intervention teachers, 1 math intervention teacher, benefits for a math intervention teacher, and then Title III funds support a .55 position of an English language learner teacher, which are all incredibly valuable for that population that we're serving. Title I funds also support our homeless student population under the McKinney-Vento Act, supporting transportation for these homeless students, including late bus, and then professional learning for those schools that qualify as Title I schools. So they are incredibly well-used funds. That's not something that shows up in our budget book because it's grants, but that is something that obviously impacts the operation of our school, and we don't need to carry operational funds for those staff members. Mr. Sylvia?
Just out of curiosity, where do the homeless children live? If they're homeless? So, I mean, how is this being quantified and...
Mrs. Moraka can give you a good explanation.
There are state regulations around qualifying for homeless. So a student, I will use an example of the recent fire at the Grantmore in Newington. If there were families living at the Grantmore and they can no longer go back into that residence, but they could move to another residents on the Berlin Turnpike in Berlin, Connecticut, they're considered displaced and homeless from Newington. So then we would be providing the transportation from wherever they're going to reside back to Newington. And that's just a requirement we have. We also have to ensure that they get instruction that can help them stay at the same level that they were. So sometimes by being displaced, it means a student can't stay for after-school programs. So we would then ensure that that student could stay and transportation would be provided. It could be that a family is no longer able to pay their mortgage or their rent, and they have to move in with a friend in another community. That makes them homeless. And so then we need to, through McKinney-Vento, provide services to bring them back into Newington so they can attend the school where they resided and are no longer homeless. And that we evaluate it at the end of every year, but it doesn't mean that it is just a yearly condition. It could be that people can be homeless for more than a year.
There's one more thing that I just want to mention. Because of some of the motels on the Turnpike and the way they're set up with efficiencies, someone has to just check in for one night, and if they check out the following day, they could be homeless. And so therefore, we are then responsible for that education. So you just need to check in one night to any one of the motels on the Turnpike.
Do we have any quantitative data on the number of individuals that would qualify for this?
We do, because also from being homeless, you are eligible for free meals. So between Mrs. Guglioso's office, my office, and Food Services, we know the numbers, and we actually know the names and where they're residing. So I can count up the numbers if that's something you're interested in terms of how many homeless students.
I might be in the future, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Maraca, do we encounter situations of, like a lot of people would classically think of homeless as nowhere to stay and they're on the street or in a shelter, things like that?
That is what probably the general public would believe, but I do have to clarify. I'm looking at Cindy because when I first came to Newington, I was told that Newington had no homeless families. And I looked at my then superintendent, Dr. Perlini, and I said, you probably have more than you realize because you have all of the motels, and that constitutes as homeless because it is not considered a permanent housing arrangement. So technically, our families who are living in some of those efficiencies are by definition considered homeless.
Further questions on the title money, the homeless question, Dr. Braverman?
Are we increasing the number of homeless just generally, would you say?
This year, yes.
I'm not surprised.
Mr. Tufel?
Am I correct in assuming then if somebody checks out of the motel on a Berlin Turnpike, like say to Grantmore because they were displaced out of there, they moved to Willimantic, we're responsible for them in Willimantic to bring them back here or to educate them in Willimantic?
Well, that's a great question because it really is a parent's choice. So it would depend on the family's decision, but if the family is deciding that they're only going to be in Willimantic temporarily and then find another place to live in Newington, they would probably request that we provide the transportation back to Newington. So yes, one year we were transporting, was it all the way out to Barkhamsted to pick someone up and bring them back? No, Barkhamsted, Connecticut. And so for a child, that's a pretty long trip every day, early in the morning.
Thank you for that explanation, Mrs. Maraca. It's a really, we've talked about it once or twice in curriculum over the year. It's a really interesting and sad kind of issue, and sometimes it can feel like you could get hoodwinked by someone, but the reality is there's a child that's blameless in it, and if we're not educating the child, some other town is. So it's one of those things that is good about public education, that at least someone is caring for the child that's blameless in the family situation sometimes. So a very tough situation for some families. Moving on from that cheery subject, further discussion points for our budget discussions. Mrs. Strohs.
question is for probably Dr. Collins and for Mrs. Maraca. I can't, I feel
You
funny,
gotta look
like,
right at,
I know.
good reminder for everyone, look at your microphone and we won't consider you rude,
Okay, thank
only
you.
during the confines of these meetings.
Okay, so I know that last time we talked about where the instructional coaches were in the budget. I understand that piece to it. Am I understanding that they are 092s, or is there certification teaching?
They are teachers, so we did not, I don't know if any of them have an 092, I doubt it, but we did not want administrators, we wanted teachers.
So they are not in charge of any kind of evaluation over
Absolutely
the
not.
teachers?
No, that would defeat the whole purpose of
Do
it.
they have any contact at all with children?
Oh.
Like,
Oh, yeah,
so like they're actually instructing children?
yeah. They will do model lessons, they will do a variety of things. I'll let Wendy speak to that, but
Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Kraus. I assumed it was Mrs. Morocco.
That's okay. Yes, as Dr. Collins said, they are interacting with children. Their responsibilities include doing model lessons in classrooms. They engage in what we call a coaching cycle, where they might be partnering with the teacher over a period of time to help implement a new curriculum area, new pedagogy, and so they would be interacting with that class day after day. Our literacy coaches actually provide small group support to students who require intervention, particularly Tier 3 students who are our neediest students because of their background. So their interaction with students could be anywhere from a pull-out in their office, providing support, to push in the classroom or doing whole group lessons with the class.
Okay, thank you.
And I do want to add on to one of the questions we asked when we were bringing in coaches was about evaluation, because it was around the same time as all of that, and it was not at all about evaluating, but about that daily kind of in your face at all times professional development. And in your face isn't a good term, but job embedded was what I was really looking for, and if you look in the dictionary it means the same thing. Job embedded professional development was the whole purpose for the teachers to have someone else on staff that could be a confidant, that could help them, but was not in an evaluative position like an administrator, who teachers may be afraid to go to an administrator who's going to evaluate them after, because they don't want that to turn into something that could hurt their career. They have someone who they can collaborate with and can help their practice before their evaluation and get them up to, or after an evaluation, to get them moving in the right direction in the way that we want things done. So that's that. Do you have further follow-ups on? Not right now. Further discussion points from the board? Sure.
Okay, as far as the budget goes, in light of the fact that we realized that we weren't using as much diesel, I'm tired, as much diesel, I said board, the budget, would it be possible, like, in that number, is there flexibility in that number? That 210,000, I think it was. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
It didn't go up, and we saw a blip, I think, toward the end, because we didn't see any variation in the use until the end, right?
You're speaking about the diesel fuel? Is that what you're, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you properly.
I'm sorry, yeah, so like,
Okay.
I'm thinking about, where we could maybe, when we do get the budget, get the questions answered, where we could maybe save some money. So if the diesel, I had it, and I apologize, was 210, I was right, $210,000. Is that a true representation in light of what we figured out with the diesel being lost? Is that a true number of what we would need?
The answer as of today, the answer is yes. It's both diesel and gasoline. The fuel bids that the Board of Ed and the town of Newington participate in is not opened until sometime next month. So I don't know what next year's pricing is going to yield. I mean, we're coming off a good contract right now, but all the prices you see around town are up. I can't say that I'm expecting it to be where we're at. I think it'll be 10 to 20% higher than what we're currently paying. I don't think we have really any ups or any downside risk as far as the budget being too low for what our needs are. It might, if we have good fortune or the market dips, and we're able to catch the pricing on a low point, we might have something available for us for a potential cut, but that won't be till mid to end of March, we'll know that.
Can you explain, Lou, how that number is built? Is it built from, it's an amount of gallons times a price we're expecting to pay, and we
Yes.
estimate the amount of gallons based on our bus routes and miles that they drove over a period of time? Can you explain that model that you use?
Yes, it's a combination model. It's both gas and diesel. You know, our traditional utilization has been in the 55,000 to 60,000 gallon range almost every year. You know, the bulk of based on our purchasing records, the bulk of the diesel loss occurred during the summer of 2017 through the end of the calendar year. You know, if you looked at the trend line numbers for the first 2 years of that, it would not have shown a meaningful difference because you have to factor in number of school days, how many runs and routes, how many buses running. I don't think you would have been able to really create a analysis that would yield any meaningful trend that you would look at. It was just, you know, within a couple percentage points that's there. In looking at the pricing model, you know, for a 60,000 gallon purchase, we need, if we say $2.50 is the number you need, then you need 150,000 for diesel, and I don't remember the gallons we consume for gasoline that go through the pumps, but that would pick up the differential to the full cost that's there. So, in, you know, prevailing rates for gas are $2.70, $2.60 a gallon right now. So we'd have to just see where all those prices come in at. So, you know, unfortunately, you don't have this at the start of budget. You have it at the end of the budget season.
Follow-ups
Is that
on-
adequate for?
Mr. Tufel?
Lou, are all the BOE facilities presently on CNG gas?
No, all 7 facilities for schools are on CNG gases, one aspect of their heating possibilities. Originally, there were 6 of the 7 schools on a dual fuel arrangement. So when oil prices were very high, you would switch over to natural gas, run the boilers on natural gas. On those years where it flip-flopped and the gas prices were much higher, you could just move back to oil and stay there. You know, we'd have a pricing arrangement with the gas company for this, what they call an interruptible service, which is discounted probably 20 or 25% from their book rate. That would give them the prerogative of calling us up and saying, get off natural gas, we need our inventory for other clients, and we would have to burn oil. You know, last year we took 2 of our tanks out of commission that were coming to the end of their 3rd-year useful life. That was Anna Reynolds and Ruth Chafee. Right now our tank is essentially drained at Elizabeth Green, and Kellogg and Patterson will be the next 2 that are up on the schedule for actual tank removal in the next year. And you know, we're just burning off our inventory right now instead of trying to pull it out. Of when the 7 schools are done for removal of the underground tanks, we still will be left with 2 oil heating systems. One is an above ground tank that's in the bus garage at 159 Garfield, and we have an underground tank at the field house for that building. Okay, and these would be scheduled over the next couple years for removal.
Is that for the swap going from gas back to oil? Is that due to the temperature? Lower temperatures?
Well, when it's real cold, we used to get calls from CNG saying,
Yeah.
you know, move off oil or move off gas, go to oil.
Thank you.
Mrs. Guy?
Just to clarify, that means we will no longer have that.
Dual fuel
We'll
capability.
only
Correct.
use natural gas.
Right, the boilers will still be equipped to handle it, but we'll no longer have a tank in the ground. It's basically just prohibitively expensive to put in a new tank for where today's market conditions are. Certainly if things change where natural gas doubles in price, where it's economically viable to put a tank in, we certainly would consider it, but as of now, that's not on the horizon.
Okay, and the plan is for those last 2 facilities to have their tanks removed also, and do they?
No, there'll be no need to remove them at the bus garage. That's already an above ground tank that's inside one of the garages.
Okay,
The tank at the field house would need to be replaced or we would have to design something new, either bring in a natural gas service at that location.
Okay, those
or-
locations only run on oil.
Correct.
Okay. And the intention is for them to stay that way for now.
Right, we have to investigate whether we can get to a CNG's arm to bring in a natural gas line up there. But
Okay.
I don't think would be economically, in their interest to do that.
No, okay, thank you.
Further board questions on that topic?
Any budget topic?
Or any budget topic?
Okay. On the green sheet that we got tonight, where we have 180 reduction, line 12, reduce health benefits account negative 180, that's the same health benefit monies that we
That's
also talked about.
That's the same number that we are talking about, that are not definite yet.
Right.
And that's the number that the agent of record thinks we'll get to, and hopefully next week we'll have an actual number there.
Thank you.
So since we're all looking at it now, this is something that I asked Dr. Collins and Lou to put together. I didn't think it would have this much detail on it, but to start looking at ways to get down and what their recommendations would be, so we have some food for thought in terms of where our budget's going to go before we transmit to the town council, what number below which we have real issues like we had last year in terms of maintaining the staff. And so, I guess we'll start, it was on my list to talk about anyway, but one of the things I had asked is whether or not there is, if we looked again at the expulsion issue with the legislation, and is there anything else we could do or any way to lessen that? So Dr. Collins or Lou, do you want to talk about what you've come up with? So if we look at that, there's a $50,000 potential reduction, and coupled with what's called Odyssey Wear, which we heard some discussion of at one of our other classes, which is a module to do the learning that those students would need.
So there, right now we have 6 students who are expelled, and one of them is in a alternative facility. So that was one of the reasons why we were going to put the security element to it. I don't believe that will likely no longer be needed. So I think we can reduce that. We still have the obligation for each student to either send them to CREC or provide it ourselves. We still think we can do it for less, and so we think we can take $50,000 off of that price. We still don't have a location. So that is going to, that was not included in this. But we need a location for free somewhere. This would just include the staffing. And then the $7,000, which is adjustment number 4, we currently have, I want to say, 15 licenses. And so if we plan on never having 15 students expelled, which I can only remember one time where we had more, typically it's around 6 or 7. So we can cut the licenses down to 7 and still be okay. So those two combined would be $57,000 that we could reduce possibly.
Mrs. Guyon?
Can you just remind us, when you say we don't need security now, was that $50,000 for a security officer to be at that location with
It
the?
wouldn't be 50,000 for the security, so it would, we're going to do it a little bit differently, and maybe not do as extensive a program, because there's still some question at the state level. I seem to think they're coming down fairly strong and very specific, but it still is possibly up for debate, apparently. And so while it wouldn't be the full-blown program, it would be, I think it would meet the minimum letter of the law, let's say.
And so the reduction of $50,000
It's a
is
combination of
staffing and
staffing.
security? It's
Yes.
just staffing?
Well, staffing, security would include staffing, yeah.
Okay, so both of those areas then. Okay, that wasn't clear in what you just said before.
Sorry.
And then for the Odyssey Wear, that,
Pamela can speak
can
to
you
that.
explain that one more time? Because I need more explanation. I'm
Odyssey
sure other
Wear,
people do too.
Odyssey is the online system that we use for students sometimes who are on a longer-term homebound due to illness. We also use it in the high school. We have some students who come to Newington, transfer in, and they don't have credits in health, which is a requirement, so we can put them online for health. We also can use them for students who are expelled when they work with the teacher so that they can get an English course, a math course, and it's all online and it's monitored by that facilitator. So right now we have 15 licenses. I feel confident because it's an active seat over the 8 periods and any hours, 24/7, that we can rotate students through it. So even if we went beyond 7, we could be creative in how students would get access. So once I am no longer on, Stephen could take my spot. It's not assigned to students. It's just a slot, a seat.
So that fits in with what you were just saying with the expulsion students could use that program also. Okay, that makes good sense. That was a good clarification. Thank you.
And so that means that there were in the $150,000, a portion, $15,000 or so, was for these Odyssey Ware seats, and so we'll reduce that in half, just about, to take away $7,000. Is that right?
It's actually in our curriculum account.
It's in the curriculum.
It is in the curriculum account.
But it's not used for
It's used
other purposes,
both.
or
It's used
Just for homebound?
both at the high school and for students who are out of school for various reasons.
okay. Before Mr. Brand, I do also just want to mention that although this is on a specific list of adjustment 1, 2, 3, 4, as we all know, these lists can change multitude of times. These are suggestions that I requested for discussion purposes, so we could have some things that the administration up front felt comfortable with at least discussing with us, so that we can have the discussion and debate among ourselves. So this is not an exact list. This is not things that we want to see happen, but it is what the administration responded to my question with. So with that caveat, Mr. Branda.
Have there been any leads on a facility for the program, and was there any luck in talking with neighboring towns to see what they've been doing? I know we talked about that a few weeks ago.
Right, we do have, I want to say, one student in New Britain, or we do. So we were able to send one student to New Britain, so we have worked out an arrangement with New Britain Public Schools where we can, at obviously a cost at far less than CREC, we can, so we've been able to place one student there, but they only had one opening.
Sorry, I meant in terms of they're all dealing with the same thing as us in terms of the next year, the mandate and everything like that. So has there been any luck in talking with them to see what they're doing facility-wise? I know we're handcuffed by the charter a little bit, but I just wasn't sure if there was any investigation on that and what you're hearing from everybody else.
Right, we have a brand new superintendent in Berlin. The previous one was on board with a lot of this, and so we start over again. And we'll talk to him, and Weathersfield they're willing to, obviously, they're in the same boat we are. The problem is who gets the facility, how does it get paid for, how do the teachers get paid for, how do we do this? It shouldn't be rocket science, you would think, right? But it's a little more complicated than one might think.
So those are conversations that are ongoing right now?
We can have them. The problem is that the board is not, in Newington, is not allowed to lease a space, so we can't, we actually have to go, if they're able to do it, we can then enter into agreement with Weathersfield.
So I assume we will receive more information as we find out more.
And as far as our own facility here, there are a couple of options that we looked at. One was obviously here in this building. From what I understand, there obviously will be no room because there's, considering the renovation coming up, and I do understand that. There is one other facility that obviously the town still owns that we're looking at, and so it's just a matter of whether or not the board wishes to exert its authority and require the facility back.
So further discussions with the facilities committee are probably going to happen. I think they've discussed that option already. Mr. Sylvia?
So I'm a little slow, Dr. Collins. That last sentence, lost me. So when you say it's within our preview to make a decision, but then I lost the rest of the meaning of your sentence.
Okay, so the Board of Education, when it no longer needs a school, will turn it over to the town because it no longer needs the school. When the board needs a school, if the town still owns it, the board can request that the school be returned to it.
We didn't abdicate the asset to the town to let the town lease or do whatever they want with that said facility. I mean, that's like, we're gonna go back to the town and say, I want, center, the one on Main Street.
That's different, that was sold.
That was sold.
That was
by
sold,
the
it's
town.
no longer owned by the town, right?
All right, so it's still, wherever this other asset is,
Mhm.
if we say we want it back, the town is forced to give it up or
Well,
get it back for us?
The town still owns it. And therefore, if the board requires it as a use of a school facility, then the board would retain control of that. If it's a town-owned facility.
That doesn't fit with my, upbringing. We give it up, it's up. It belongs, okay, never mind. Thank you for the explanation.
Dr. Braverman?
One place that possibly we could bunk in with would be CW Resources in New Britain. They're on 100 Myrtle Street. They have staff there all through the day. I know the special ed department visited over there and they came here one.
Is that their facility for expulsion, right? We're partnering with them. They only have one seat, and
No, that's New Britain School System. I'm talking about CW Resources, which is a agency that trains handicapped individuals, but they have room.
Are you talking about the transition academy or the expulsion?
I'm talking about the expulsion where we need
Okay.
a place to put people,
Okay.
because they have staff there through the day.
Not related to the school department at all.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. CW Resources is a separate entity totally.
So we would lease space from them, or we would?
I think we would just, I don't know, we'd have to talk
Okay.
to them. I can give you contact numbers after.
Okay, great.
Further board discussion on the expulsion-related topic? Dr. Braverman?
Dr. Collins, what are the other towns thinking? Do you know? In your
I
crystal ball?
don't know
Oh.
what they're thinking. It's hard to tell. I can tell you what the other superintendents are thinking. That's quite short notice and very difficult to put something like this together in these tight budget times. So I think we're all of the same mind. Regardless, it is a law, and we must follow it. So we are all attempting to put together programs. Some districts already have them because they have enough students to warrant it. We have never expelled that many students, so it really didn't warrant one here. Now, even for only 6 students, it still would be beneficial for us to do it, even if we had to do it on our own.
And I do want to mention that last night at the town council meeting, the state legislative, the reps and Senator Doyle were at the town council meeting, and Councilor Del Buono did bring up this issue to them, noting how it's impacting our budget, and their response was along the lines of, it got snuck in, no one understood the impact that it would have, we know everyone dislikes it, and whether or not anything is going to happen after that is unclear, if it would happen in a timely manner. But I do want to point out that it was brought up to the state delegation, who has the power to potentially try to reverse or change the guidelines or waive requirements for a year or whatever it is they sometimes do when they pass things without letting us know beforehand. Mr. Tufel?
Dr. Collins, did I hear we are not eligible to, or accountable to lease a building or a space?
By law, the Board of Education is allowed to. By town charter, In Newington, the Board of Education is not allowed to. So the state law does allow you to, but the town charter does not. So therefore, technically, the state law would overrule. It's just a matter of, do you really want to get into an argument over a town charter, with the town council? I don't think that you would. I don't believe so anyway.
Mr. Brandon.
Sorry, are you saying, I thought a few weeks ago you said a charter says we cannot enter into an agreement with another town, not that the Board of Ed just can't lease a space. I just want to make that clear.
The board can't on its own in Newington going to enter a multi-year lease.
Okay, gotcha.
1 year lease? Any kind of lease or a multi-year lease?
Well, if you have the money in your budget for it, that's one thing, but we don't have any money in our budget for it. And so technically you could enter it if it was just for this year, and it's a one-time thing and you had it in your budget. But if you didn't, and then you'd have to put it in your budget somewhere, and the only place that would come from is public school CIP, and you have.
Okay, so what I'm understanding is that if it's in our operational year, we could lease something through our operating budget.
Right.
But the multi-year, because our Board of Ed doesn't have multi-year funds, we only have 1 year fund at a time, we can't enter a multi-year lease without the town council's approval.
Right, the law says you can, so you are allowed by state law to do it,
okay.
right, but.
Further questions on the expulsion or the fine details on leasing property as a Board of Education? Moving along, any further discussion points? Mrs. Droz?
Can we talk about this?
We
All right.
can talk about whatever you want.
What is the reallocation position to preschool refer to?
So that represents, right, so in our budget right now is $100,000 for a preschool classroom to try to do what we're supposed to do for our special needs students, which is have typically developing peers with them. We are overcrowded right now in our preschools. We need another classroom. So there's $100,000 currently in Dr. Collins' budget for that purpose. This would essentially be a retiring elementary school teacher would be replaced with a preschool teacher and the tutorial staff that goes along with it to support that extra classroom. So we would eliminate an elementary school classroom through attrition, not through a layoff. That position would then go to preschool. The result, of course, the very likely result, as we've seen the last few years, is that class sizes would increase, and that would be determined, later on after our budget is passed based on where administration felt it was appropriate to take that classroom out and all of those kind of decisions. Yep.
That's a wonderful explanation. Are there any other teachers retiring that we could reallocate positions?
I think we have 3 or 4.
But the problem with that is you get into very scary numbers. You can't.
My only question is on here, is staff layoffs.
Well,
So-
no, that's down below
Right.
way below the line, and
Right.
don't look
So-
above the line.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
it's
So
fine to
the-
look above the line.
The-
There's a lot of lines on here. I can look above the green line too.
The context for that response is that over the last handful of years, the immediate response was we have this many retirees, we are able to, through attrition, get rid of those positions. And so I think there was one slide in the budget presentation that showed the amount of positions we are less over the last couple of years. And so obviously what we've done in the past instead of doing layoffs has been if we have retirements, we get rid of those positions first. Last year was the first time we had layoffs as a result of it because of the nature of the 4-year or so time period where we've been not replacing a lot of retiring teachers and layoffs. Everyone we did last year had a real impact where you could see 2 more kids in a class and less electives. This year, you would expect the same things with any teacher that we're not replacing for staff because we are already at the level where you're going to see the increases in class size. So that's the trade-off, and sometimes we as a body have to make the decision of whether or not we slash some of the things like instructional supplies and books, get rid of a position and potentially have increased class size in certain areas in certain schools, or some other decisions that we can make. So one thing we've often done is slash the maintenance budget, which is on here, but of course alongside the diesel spill and using a lot of maintenance money from public school CIP, our flexibility in terms of maintenance is also somewhat gone right now. So
Yeah, and I didn't mean to say you can't. Of course, you can do anything you like, but I'm just saying we're just at very scary numbers at that level.
My only question with that is, at one point in time, oh, Mr. Freese is here. We heard that the numbers in the math department were huge, and then we got them, and some classes were a little big, but some were pretty reasonable. So,
Right.
And I had this conversation, I've had it many times, like, what is the ideal number? Obviously, the ideal number is not 30 in a classroom for elementary school. And it's definitely not 30 in a middle school. But in the high school, like, an AP calculus class, like 27 kids, all honors kids, might not be that horrendous. So I guess my question is really, what are the numbers?
And so we have the snapshot from the last meeting of what the actual numbers are for the math sections, right? And so the issue when we're talking right now about what next year's classes are going to look like, and we all kind of know this, is that, first of all, the schedule hasn't been made at the high school. So we don't know what it's going to look like, and oftentimes the amount of kids in those classes is solely dependent on how many kids sign up for them. So we could have, and this year I think is the perfect example for AP Calculus, I think one of the sections is around 15 and one's like 26, 27, because it's completely relative to how many kids sign up and how it fits into their schedules, and you have the numbers in front of you. So the one thing we did learn, though, is that by reducing staff and math, we've reduced our electives, and when we look at those elective courses, they're 25, 26 for the discrete math, and that's a problem. Maybe it's a discrete problem, I don't know. But those are the issues that we get into, because we can say we predict X, Y, and Z is going to happen over the next year, but it's before we've run a class schedule, before we know what the exact impact's going to look like. Social studies, we lost positions at the high school, and it just decreases some electives. Some class sizes will show bigger, some will show perfectly reasonable class sizes just based on the schedule. But, it's easier in elementary school to predict how many are going to be in the classes.
It's also our first year with the 4-year math requirement, 4 credits in math, so that's likely it would have to go up, I would assume, right?
I mean, being that I don't know who is retiring, and I don't need to know necessarily, but, I'm looking at these above the line, and above the top line, is the deferred opening, and, the evil word of the deferred opening of the STEM Academy at the high school. And, I've had people in the town say it always seems like that's always on the chopping block. It's always, how dedicated is the board to that?
And they're completely right,
Right.
that has been one of the first things to go each year when we get getting down to the final number with the town council. And the decision, as I talked about a few meetings ago, by this body at this table has been, instead of getting rid of something we have right now, we get rid of something that we don't have, because it potentially impacts students less. That may very well be a decision we have to make again. It may come down to losing positions to attrition or not opening the STEM Academy, and that's the decision that we have to make today to be able to hire someone to start up, and the potential of layoffs is always possible, and I hope that's not something we have to talk about, and our choices are better than they were last year, but you never know.
And I agree completely. I guess the question really is without knowing what the impact of the people retiring, and I don't know. Obviously, if it's social studies, a social studies teacher retiring, that would be terrible to not hire them, because that has dropped over the years. And that department seems to get beat up a little bit. But if it's a department that maybe has a lot of people in it, and it only is going to, and without knowing that information, it would be hard to say what would be more important, not hiring the retired teacher or adding in the STEM Academy.
Do we know? We can certainly get some clarification. So I know at least 3. So 3 of the retirees are elementary teachers. Is that right?
4.
So it's all of them are elementary teachers?
No.
Okay, and there's some elsewhere?
Yes, a middle school and a high school. So we do look at all the departments, we do look in all those areas, and based on that, we're able to give you recommendations that are on this list.
we think carefully and critically about what you're bringing up, and often that's what we're looking at when we're trying to make the best decisions possible for the students and the class sizes and enrollments. But right now, a majority of the retirements we're predicting for this upcoming next year are at the elementary level.
Mr. Sylvia.
Thank you. So you looked at all the departments?
We looked at all the folks that indicated that they would be retiring at the end of this year and where they do teach, yes.
And the transportation department?
I believe currently we're talking about certified classroom teachers.
I'm talking about staff.
Right.
All right?
Right.
Because I'm trying to stay above the line.
So we do, so yes, the answer is yes, though, for that as well. All of our certified and non-certified employees, we do receive information around their retirement. However, the AFSCME contract is a little bit different. They only have to give 2 weeks notice. So that contract doesn't yield them to the same guidelines as the NTA contract.
There's a purpose why I'm asking the question, but
it may be better to ask the actual question instead of...
To ask the actual question, okay.
This is the time.
So my question is this. I think we have an excellent opportunity to consolidate functions with the town, and I would like to have that investigated as a cost-saving method. And I think we have a wonderful opportunity. Therefore, the question is can we investigate consolidating roles and responsibilities, reevaluating roles and responsibilities with our town, and see if we have opportunities to reduce administrative management and realign it. That's basically the question.
Can you be a little more specific there?
Well, I'm going to look at the transportation, all right? In the transportation department, I truly believe that back looking at the organization of the town in 2000 and to 2002, we only had 8 department heads supporting the entire town. We're now up to 16, and we've had the same level of expansion in our Board of Ed area, and I think we've got some excellent opportunities to evaluate roles and responsibilities within the NPS team so that we do not need to just replace body for body. So with the pending retirement with the transportation director, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to see, can we reallocate management responsibilities to others, therefore defer that expense and reallocate that expense to other teachers. And I don't want to get below the line. So that's generally where my head's at, is trying to see how to...
I appreciate you getting to the real point, which is whether or not we have to replace the transportation director, and is that something that can be consolidated. So I'd ask if any of the administrators have considered that, have pros and cons of that kind of decision to share with the board.
Who would do it?
Well, as far as on the Board of Ed side of operations, the only change which has occurred over the last 25 years for management staffing for non-instructional activities has been the advent of the technology area, where we now have a technology director, when education didn't require that 25 years ago. There's always been a transportation director, there's always been an assistant that's there. We've always had a cafeteria director, we've always had a custodial maintenance director, we've always had a warehouse manager, and even the warehouse manager at that time has been greatly expanded and responsibilities added to that position over the last few years. So, you know, from our side of the house, it's basically been static, other than technology as the one, leader of our operation.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. That's why I don't understand where the doubling came from.
I think
can't
that was
speak
on
to that.
the town side he was referring to, but can you speak more towards what the operation of the transportation unit would be without the director? What pros and cons you see of that kind of thing, if it was, where it would be joined with the town, if that's something you've thought about or spoken with the town about?
Well, without knowing anybody's real backgrounds and interests, I mean, you have the functions of vehicle maintenance, vehicle management, that's there. So you would have to be able to provide the home for the 90-plus vehicles we have that are our operation. If there was the interest of the town to take over maintenance activities on the vehicles in lieu of contracting that work out to DATCO or other providers, they would have to gear up with their staff internally to have 1-2 extra mechanics that specialize in bus service. They would have to have the base structure to be able to handle big vehicles and be able to run the throughput of an operation of that
Yeah,
size.
I've talked to Tom Malloy, I can't tell you how many times.
Apologies.
On this topic, and the problem with that, is they'd love to do it, they just don't have the manpower or the garage space.
Right, they would have to add substantially to their staff to
Yep.
be able to take
And
that
the
on.
garage, they need
And
a
the garage, right, to be able to do
Right,
it.
so we've talked,
Right.
that'd be
On our
great.
side, as far as the transportation directors, key responsibility is managing a staff of 50 individuals, of our drivers and our shop staff that's there, all the discipline, contract management, all those issues that go with it. You have all the routing of all the routes, 3,200, 3,300 kids get a ride every day, along with about, another 40 or so special ed students out of town that need to have customized runs done. That's there. Building that process takes 3 months all by itself. It starts typically at the end of May and goes all the way through the middle of August to prep runs for the next year, and that's essentially a full-time job for 1.5 people to just do that function. You have all of the daily management of the changes that occur, early openings, late openings, early dismissals, special schedules for days, all of these types of managing a non-consistent schedule that occurs that's here, as well as athletics, general day-to-day field trips that are embedded into the fabric of the academics system that we offer our students. It's extremely challenging management of the details that go with it. And, when you have, especially routing, where all of a sudden the run, you have two major parameters in building a run. It's time and it's number of seats. And if you have a 25-minute window from the bus leaving the high school to getting to the elementary school, that run can only be 24 minutes to be able, and it has to end up at the next place in 25. So,
Right, Lou, the simple answer, we're running the operation with 2 people.
Yeah.
And a private contractor would do it with more than that.
Right.
So there's no way
Right,
to,
you have safety
there's
issues
absolutely
and,
no way to.
DOT compliance issues.
The only thing you can
multitude of
combine,
things
which
that-
we have offered on numerous occasions, is to.
I don't think the ask was to go to private. I think the ask is to look internal to see if we have opportunities. My other question to follow up on that, Josh, is we've got 2 facilities directors. We have 2 IT directors. All right, we've got one with the town, we got one here, and I really do believe in I'll take facilities, for example. I believe that our facilities director, when the opportunity comes, is quite capable of managing all assets of this town and servicing the Board of Education's needs, and thereby saving the town money. Along the same thing with IT, as some of the information that's been discovered, the fact that we have 2 separate systems has shown its ugly head. All right? And it's causing duplicative costs to this town. We're too small of a town to have duplicative cost. And so I think, I believe that the educational director of technology, Mr. Salerno, is well-founded and needed to keep that type of identity there. However, for us to all be on the same infrastructure type solutions, you only need one, in my humble opinion, and from my experiences of being in the private sector. Where I'm trying to lead the conversation to is not to be solving it tonight. I would really like to try to have further discussion on an idea that Mr. Brander brought up in conversations is basically to have a joint type committee with the town to see if there's opportunities to create mergers, much like what we're witnessing in other communities. And I'd like for us to, this specific budget, I don't think we can make a magical cut, but I do think that we can start the actions and demonstrate that we're really trying to, at least maybe not next year, but maybe 2 years or so, that we're at a point where we can really try to show that we're still asking for the same amount of money, but we're just reallocating it to other needs. So that's really where I'm trying to go.
Certainly see where you're coming from, and I have to assume at this point that you've asked me about this before, and my apologies for not acting on it sooner, but I am seeing the mayor tomorrow morning, so I will broach that subject with him and with other members of town council to do that. I know that there has been some studies and that we've been shared with us about the joint nature of some things that go on, but it's always a good idea to get a fresh look and see if there's anything moving forward, potentially for next budget year, that would be helpful. So I will make that a priority to look into further. Mrs. Guyan, you had something. I don't know if it was answered or irrelevant now. Mrs. Droz?
I know. I just keep going back to this, but I want information before I can make an educated suggestion, decision. Can we get the, on our little answer sheets, the impact of those 4 elementary school teachers retiring and what that would do to the size of the classes in the elementary school? Thank you.
And I do,
if they weren't replaced.
if they weren't replaced, and I do want to say that I don't think that not replacing all 4 would ever be an option. I just want to make that clear for the public, but what one would do to class sizes, where you predict it might hit. I know this is something we kind of ask you for every year about if there's attrition in the ranks, where would it hit? What would that look like? I don't know if you have an idea, Wendy. It looks like you might have something now already, but something further next week would be great too.
No, I was just going to comment that, just to clarify, that when you look at line 2, reallocate position to preschool, that is one of those 4 where we are seeing that's one place where we could, so that would be the first one already, and that would create an increase. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head.
Right.
I know
If we
we'd
can
have
get
to
it.
shift around. It wouldn't be where those people are leaving. It would be we'd have
It
to
would be
shift people.
Pulling potentially
pull
from
it
another
from-
school, another grade level
Yeah.
into there, depending on.
So we'd have to look at the
what
least,
it looks like.
where will it have the least impact, and what would that impact be?
And that is a reasonable request that we typically do every year. So it's a little earlier this year than last year, but if you could provide that, that'd be great. Mr. Farisi actually, or of course, he already has it.
So I can tell you, these are preliminary numbers but even with shifting at the elementary level only, so this would be without trying to transfer anyone from upper levels down who are certified to teach in these areas. It would increase at the lower levels, because most of these retirements are at the lower levels at elementary. It would increase to class sizes of 23, 26.5, and 21.3, so 21s and 22s.
That's with all 4.
That's with, no, and then 21s. So 21s, 21, 22s, 26, 27s, and 23s.
And at what level is that? That's not
They
one
are
teacher.
all below second grade.
But that's not one teacher leaving. That's
Correct.
if all 4 of them were not replaced in those grade levels.
Correct.
Okay.
And if you try to reallocate at different grade levels, which has already been done, you would achieve the same types of numbers.
Okay. And so can you follow up on that and give us an idea of what the impact of 1 or 2 not being replaced looks like?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Tufelt?
Steve, is the advanced notice of retirement the $30,000 bonus or whatever it is? I don't know what to call it.
There is in our contract,
It's part of the contract,
there is a
correct?
clause in the NTA contract that allows for a percentage increase based on length of service and the amount of years given, up to 3 years in advance of retirement. This year, there was a binding arbitration that was done, and that's still in the contract. When I chaired negotiations 3 years ago, that was one of our attempts to get it out of the contract. It stayed in exchange for the health benefits changing, which, as we've all seen, has saved the town millions of dollars over the course of that contract. So it is something that's in there. It's in their contract. It's a bit outdated. Steve, I'm going to go to Prachi with a question first.
I wanted to say something in regards to the AP class size, and while Matt and I understand that there are budgeting issues around the size of AP classes, we feel that it's not exactly horrendous, but we both take AP classes and we have taken them in the past, and having large sizes that are around 25 students, even more, we feel that it's very hard to cover the amount of content and to have the ideal teacher to student ratio for us to understand all of the content that we're learning. And as you may know, we take the exam in May, which makes or cuts us 1 month shorter, and the teachers do a great job of fitting in all of the content through Google Classroom and everything, so that if we have a snow day, we are able to still learn things. But with many students in the class, it's hard to have that one-on-one attention. And I actually take AP Calculus, and there's AB and BC, and I believe BC has more students than an AB, and in BC we're covering more content in a shorter, or in the same amount of time, but we're covering more content than AB. And Mr. Miller does a great job covering everything. He has many videos that he shows us if we're at home and we need help, and he's always available if we have questions. But it's still very difficult to cover the amount, and there are certain topics that are a lot harder than others. And I also take AP Physics, which there are 2 periods for that one, and I am in the smaller class, which I'm very fortunate for, and I think that it's very great to have that smaller class, because when we do labs or if we're learning a harder topic, my teacher's able to go around to each group and he discusses with us about the topic and if we have any questions, and I think that's very nice, because in other classes I don't have that like one-on-one teacher, those conversations, and I'm pretty sure Matt feels the same way, but I don't know if he has anything else to say.
Yeah, definitely. I would also say, there is a point to be made, of course, that because of when AP classes are as large as they are, their class sizes, it gives students an opportunity to be more independent in their learning, which is something that students should be learning, especially if they're taking rigorous courses like AP or honors courses. However, every class, when you're doing group work every day, it becomes very difficult to learn a large portion of content, especially when perhaps you're in a group of people that, maybe don't feel as independent in what they're doing, or, things of that nature. So I think that in terms of AP classes, it is more important perhaps than in other courses for class sizes to be manageable. And I think that when you're having 25 to 30 students in a class, it is not manageable, especially in the time given.
Thank you both for your comments. I will add that AP is kind of a weird kind of subset of classes that we offer, because the general idea is if students are capable and want them, we fit them into the schedule. And it's not new that we have large class sizes. My AP Calc 40 years ago was 28 students with Mr. Miller. So it was, but it happens based on the schedule, and there's only one section that year because you couldn't split it up into 2. I think that the issue that we're having right now is that it's becoming a little bit more prevalent to have the higher numbers, because even with scheduling issues, with fewer sections of other things, it's getting a little tougher, and more of our students are capable of taking those courses now. But it's an interesting subset, but your points are certainly taken. Mrs. Guyan?
I just wanted to say that's exactly why we've asked you to be here and to be sitting at the table. I appreciate your comments. I think that you guys are both very well spoken, and I'm glad that you raised your hand and that you had something to say. I appreciate that, and encourage you to participate more.
I certainly echo that, especially as we're potentially cutting things out of our budget that may impact your classmates and siblings and other people that you know. Mrs. Strauss?
Okay, so being that you have the vibe on high school, would people, if at the end of the day we had to cut a position, bigger AP classes or STEM Academy, what's more important? What would you think? And I am not holding it to you, and it's just your opinion.
I think, and Prachi can add to this if she'd like, I think that, or disagree with it, of course. I think that if you had to pick either of those, I think that the large consensus among students would be that they would prefer to have the AP courses over the STEM Academy. I personally am not a student who has ever even considered doing class in the STEM Academy, so I don't speak for those who may prefer that over AP classes. But for many students, because of the amount of AP classes that are, I'm not very close, am I? Because the amount of AP classes that are offered in many different fields of study, it allows students to get that college experience in several different things rather than just science, technology, engineering, and math. And I think that the reward that is seen at the end, although STEM academies do have the academy programs do have their rewards, they certainly do. AP classes, in terms of the reward that is given at the end of the year, obviously, if you do well in the AP tests, the clear reward that you see going to college, I think that students would far more prefer that over the STEM academy, personally. Actually, you can add to that.
I was basically going to say exactly that. And I think AP classes teach a great deal of independence, but I also think that in this day and age, as college tuition and room and board, the costs go very high, and even with private schools, even higher. So I think that AP classes teach students a little bit of what college is like, and like Matt said, if you do really well on the exam, you do not have to take that class in college, or in most cases, that's how it is, and you save so much money that way. And I think the exam is currently $94, and that will most likely go up as the years go on, but that's much less than a college course.
I don't think I was clear on my question, and I apologize. Mr. Branda pointed it out because unfortunately at this point he's thinking like I'm thinking. I'm so sorry. Larger AP class. I would never think to cut AP classes. They're ever. I have one of those kids who are like AP kids. So the larger, you had just the concern about the size. So obviously keeping the size up a little bit to that 25, 26 might allow us to not have to potentially cut the step. So that's better question. I did not say it well. Thank you.
I think what you guys are saying though is, a lot of them, they're taking a lot of AP classes, and it may be okay for one to have a larger one, but when you're taking 5, and to not get that attention in all of your classes is really problematic. So I think I would agree with you guys. I know I would. If we don't have the Aerospace Academy there, and there's a perfectly good option at CREC for them to go if they wanted to, so they could still go to get that experience if they wanted to, if they were a full-on aerospace person. But we've had the AP classes forever at the high school, so why mess with that? You know what I mean?
I would add to that as well. I agree with that, but I would also add, last year I took one AP class. This year I have been taking 2, and next year I plan to take 4. And I would say that even last year with the one AP class, the amount of students that were in the class hampered my ability and other students' abilities to get that one-on-one experience with their teacher, with their instructor. So, and that doesn't, obviously, a lot of people enjoy group work. It all depends on how a student learns and how a student absorbs information. But for many students, it was very difficult for them to take in information, especially in the allotted time that's given.
And to add to that, I think if class sizes were to continue to increase, I think students should, or all students who are considering enrolling in AP classes, they should be informed that the class size will be large, and potential conflicts, because I think some students don't consider the size, and many students are against the size exceeding 25 students for the reasons of not having the ideal teacher-to-student ratio. But I do believe that students should be informed and maybe told that they should not be taking as many AP classes. Matt said he took 1 last year, so my sophomore year I also took 1 class. Last year I took 3 AP classes, and this year I'm currently taking 5. And I took no electives because I know the 5 was plenty of classes. And I can definitely say that the amount of content that I'm taking in is a lot, and some classes are harder than others. So, for instance, AP Psychology, I think, has some easier content, although people have argued that the exam in the end is harder than most classes. So I feel that certain classes should probably be smaller, or maybe considered to have more periods rather than just 1, for instance, like AP Calc.
Very interesting conversation we're having tonight. Further discussion. Mr. Sylvia?
I'm just going to pile on. Thank you, guys. I mean, you're keeping it real, giving us a perspective we need to hear. And I appreciate it deeply. Thank
along with that comes responsibility not to speak just because we were talking about it just for AP students though. So your responsibility is in the schools to talk with everyone and come back with other opinions, because one of the things I'm interested in is we know how many students asked for a STEM class in their schedule last year. I don't know if we have numbers on how many students are in an AP class. I know that number keeps going up year after year, and it is certainly a sizable amount of kids in our school. I'd be interested to know that. Not that, and I don't think we'll ever get to the choice between the two. I just don't think that that's how it's going to play out this year. But
I believe it's somewhere around 600 students who are enrolled in the AP program.
600
That's
slots
I don't know.
with a lot of kids
I don't know if
repeating,
it's
probably.
unique. I don't know if it's unique numbers or not. I don't know.
I'd be shocked if that was unique.
Right.
50% of that.
Right.
Emily's in all 600 of them.
But
Okay.
still, 600 is a pretty good number. We were 99 in, I want to say 2004. We were 99 students. We had in AP classes.
Mrs. Morocco.
We will see enrollment increasing in AP courses because we have open enrollment now, which is different. That's
Right.
been, I'm looking at Matt and Prachi, the last 2 years? Last year and this year, open enrollment?
That's right.
Right, and for those that don't recall that conversation, it previously was much more difficult for a student to get into an AP course. It had to be recommended by another teacher, and one of former Principal Wanker's initiatives was to make it so that students were able to make those decisions collaboratively and be able to go in if they wanted to, really to simulate more of the college experience. That the more freedom comes with the responsibility of making sure you're making good decisions for yourself. So the enrollment has gone up because of that.
And the research is very clear in this, that even if you take an AP course and get an F, you still benefit from it.
Matt?
I have a question on a different topic now.
Sure.
And it was actually interesting that you said what you said, because I was actually going to ask about the STEM Academy. What is the conversation right now surrounding the STEM Academy and its ability to move forward or not to move forward?
At the present time, the 2 teachers necessary to open up the STEM Academy at the high school are in the budget. We are very hopeful. That's our top priority of things to add that we don't currently have. The backside to that is that we don't know where the town council is going to want to end up for a budget percentage for us. So in years past, that has been one of the first things that we have decided to eliminate, rather than laying off teachers or getting rid of other classroom teachers, because it's something that we don't have right now. So it's easier to get rid of what you don't have than something you already have. That may be a conversation that we have to have over the next 2 months. It's dependent on other decisions we can make, our health benefits money, if the town council is willing to go at a higher percentage than the last handful of years, then that's something that goes into it. So, we are fighting very hard as a board, because it is one of our top priorities as a district to be able to do that. And one of the reasons why I said not just the AP kids is because one of my favorite parts about the STEM Academy programming is that you can come out of the biomedical area being a certified medical assistant and be prepared to take that test. And at 18, a graduate of high school, you can go out and get a job that is out there right now needed for people, and that it's not just the high-flying kids with all A's. It's for students that have an interest in the health field or in the aerospace field that can take some classes and get out there and be able to have a job right away if college isn't right for them. So certainly serves the whole population, which is one of the most exciting parts of it, in my opinion, and something that we don't, we've heard for a few years how we've gotten rid of a lot of programs at the high school that would have allowed students to have a job right after, like the auto shop. We just couldn't do it that well anymore, and this is one of our big plans to be able to put things back in place, where alongside the Business Academy, where there's Microsoft certifications that come from it, being CMA certified, we have real career paths for people who aren't going to go to college or aren't going to go to college right away, or need to work during college or some other post-secondary. So long answer, but one of our top priorities, it is every time Carol's in the back, she's the majority leader on the town council, so you guys can, you can talk to her after too, but every time I talk to her, it's one of the things we talk about in terms of board priorities. And this has been almost a 10-year, pretty much the whole time you've been superintendent, 10-year project to get the middle school academies and the high school. So a lot of money and time has been invested. You follow up?
Yeah, a follow-up question for sure. I just would like to know, and I don't like to entertain what ifs, but would it have been possible, and for future projects as well, is it possible to enter into agreements with the town council for funding or things like that prior to the construction of projects of this magnitude, maybe a couple years before or a few years before, whatever time is allotted to construct?
It is certainly possible to enter that type of agreement. The issue that you run into, and there's kind of a couple phases, and this kind of breaks down how building projects happen. So a couple of issues are, one, that these bodies could enter into an agreement. The bodies change every 2 years. So that's always a consideration, that can you bind a future body for a very specific purpose, and kind of the general feeling among those elected leaders is that's inappropriate to do, and anyone could come after and back out of that agreement anyway. The other part of it is that building committees, and this is a good refresher for all of us, is that building committees and capital improvement projects go through the town council. They're the ones with final authority over everything for the budget. So as these projects, so for instance, the high school STEM Academy building project, it's a proposal from the Board of Ed in the town's CIP capital improvement project account. That goes to a committee, the CIP committee, that's made up of town councilors and Board of Ed members. They vote on what's going to go through and get passed for both pay-as-you-go projects and the amount of debt that we're going to service for large bonding projects. So the town hall is going to go out to bond like a house mortgage. We pay it back over 20 years or so. So it goes through the CIP committee, which is majority town council members, and then it goes to the full town council who approves it. So they get many reports on things, and many of the members of the town council have been heavily invested in these STEM programs for the 10 years. And the members have changed, but the enthusiasm for the projects hasn't changed. Unfortunately, the last couple of years, and last year was really the first year we were ready to open the STEM academies in earnest. You ran into budget problems, and the state budget was a mess, and tough decisions had to be made, but both bodies were well aware that the consequence of the budget was going to be not opening the STEM academies, and that's been on the table since day one, that both bodies are aware. I think it's a priority for sure for both bodies, and it's just a matter of whether or not there's the will to have taxes at a level that allows us to do that, and whether or not we could come up with some other solution to do it anyway. So that's kind of how the process works. It is collaborative to a point. Town council does have final authority. We can do what we want once they tell us how much money we have, and then we make a decision at this body, like I said a couple times, whether or not we're going to raise class sizes in first grade or reduce electives at the high school or not open the STEM academy. So those are the decisions.
Thank you.
9 years ago, I introduced the whole package kind of to everybody. That one-to-one, the whole thing, and some people thought I was crazy, and I'm not saying I'm not, but we were able to pull most of it off. So we were at the tail end of that original plan from 9 years ago, and we just unfortunately, we got the building built. We just didn't get the last piece of it. So that's all we have missing. So that we're almost there.
Very close.
Thank you.
Hoping this year, hoping and working hard more so than hoping. Further discussion on the STEM academies. There are a couple other items on this list that, Mr. Brando, is there something you're interested in?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Actually, just a question. I know, Dr. Collins, you're working on that maintenance list that we talked about last week in terms of the categories. So when you talk about a possible adjustment of taking off $220,000, can you, when you're coming up with that categorized list, can you maybe add some notes into where you see those adjustments, or are you just saying you're going to cut it right down the middle between certain areas. Is that okay?
It's just I don't want to say a random cut, but it's just it's a dollar amount to get to a certain point. Obviously, it worries me because that's a problem area for us.
To add some context to that, my request for a list of things to cut was to get down to basically an arbitrary number, but how do we get down a percent to hand something off to the town council as, this is us getting down, and it did kind of work out that 1%, and probably a little bit less than a 1% cut to our current budget is what doesn't really impact us terribly, and it's things that we can do. Obviously I have issues with things that are on this list, and it's not the list I would have created, but
you asked for it.
But I asked for a list and I got one, and this is what we can. It's a building block for us to supplement with other ideas and all of that goes along with it. So the 220 is an arbitrary number to be able to get it down to about 4.5, which is about 1% lower than we came in at. Is it better at $20,000 or $100,000, or could it be 240 or 250? And those are, it's hard to quantify.
Yeah. All right. Thank you,
Mr. Tufel.
To emphasize what Mike just said, is the $220,000, is that going to cost us in the long run $500,000?
Probably more.
That's the
By
issue.
delaying
Absolutely.
maintenance.
Absolutely.
Now
Yes.
it's going to double in a couple of years,
Or more.
next year or
Absolutely. We've been doing that. That's been the problem.
It's already costing us.
It's already costing us.
Mrs. Guyan.
For the number 9 adjustment here, the reduction in reading support, on the right-hand side it says Title I funds possible. Does that mean that's a position that could potentially be funded by Title I funds? Or
Mrs. Maraca speak briefly about it?
It is, excuse me, it is a position that could possibly be funded by Title I funds. 3 of our schools currently are eligible for Title I funds. We have supported at the elementary level partial because we've increased time, so Title I funds are paying for that. And if the board does reduce the position and we agree as an administrative team that's an important position, I would reallocate money that is currently in Title I and I'm assuming will be there for next year because we've been pretty levelly funded for the last 5 years. We would then reallocate dollars that are there for professional learning resources. We can't touch what we would have to give to Emmanuel Christian. And then hopefully our percentage for homeless would not need to increase. And we could cover that salary.
And so this is probably a good time to talk about for Mr. Brandon and Mrs. Strohs, who weren't here last budget, if and when we had to reduce the amount of staff we have through attrition. What we've historically done is say we are going to reduce X number of positions and give the superintendent authority to make the determination of what positions those are at his discretion based on the best interests of the students. So, because you could say, we're not replacing that 3rd grade teacher, but it may wind up being that it's actually a different position that makes more sense, and that this would be potentially one of them. So if we were saying we're going to reduce 2 positions to clear out $170,000, the administration would then look at what the options are. Is it 2 classroom teachers? Is it a reading teacher if they think they can cover it somewhere else, and a classroom teacher? Is it some support staff or other places? So that's kind of how that would work. So we asked them for as much guidance on what they think that would be and what the estimate would be for how the impact would work. And then once that happens in our meeting in September is kind of when we find out what the final decision was. That's all part of the idea that we're a policy overarching board. They kind of make those day-to-day decisions on what's best. I think the last thing on the list is reducing social studies textbooks, which caught my eye when we talked about this earlier. Mrs. Maraca, I think you would have an explanation for what that entails.
Yes, I spoke with Mrs. Antonio, who is the coordinator for social studies, and what we felt we could do is reduce the number of textbooks and just increase the online so that we would have a cost savings.
And so that's part of is that something that's typical that you go back to all the department heads and ask them to relook at the numbers of everything to give you any dollars that they can, or was it specific to social studies?
In this case, it was specific to social studies because we have done that. As an administrative team, we've gone through the budget and looked at where there might be some things that look like high amounts. And social studies just kind of caught our eye. I think it was $39,000. So then Mrs. Antonio and I met and had a conversation about what could we live with and what could we live without.
Okay. And so this $10,000 wouldn't affect instruction. It wouldn't affect what the students are actually being able to do in those classes.
No, it would not.
Dr. Braverman?
When it comes to online textbooks, do we still charge the students for the online access? Or the school or someone?
No, we pay. It's a subscription. When you buy the textbook, it becomes a subscription so that you have the online textbook and then online resources. So once we pay that, we own it.
For how many years?
Currently with the social studies, it is a 6-year agreement.
Mrs. Guyon?
Is that by user, or is that just a flat fee when you purchase the books?
It's by a number. So if you buy 65 books, you get 65 online licenses. And then if you're only buying a class set of 25 or maybe 30, Matt and Prachi now, if you're buying a set of 30 for an AP course, you would only get 30 licenses, but you might have 2 classes that are going to share those books, so then you'd need to buy another 30 online licenses.
So the books come with a license, and then you can purchase extra?
It's the most cost-effective way to buy it, is to buy the textbook with the license, because the license is less expensive that way.
Okay, but what I'm asking you is that normally when you buy the textbook, you get the textbook and the license, but you can also then purchase additional licenses?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion on this item or additional discussion questions that the group has pertaining to our budget? Going once. Okay. We will move off of this item. Again, like I said, unless anyone has a very strong preference for some reason, I don't think it makes sense to adopt, adjust, or transmit tonight. Whether or not we do that next week potentially depends on if health benefits comes in. So I would say to everyone, be prepared to talk about adjustments to the budget next week. If not, personally, my preference would be to have one more evening of discussion, because I think that there are more areas for us to discuss ways to adjust our budget. Then the meeting on the 28th is the last date that we will have, that we have to, by that meeting, adopt, adjust, and transmit our budget to the town manager. So we will move on to new business item 2, which is discussion of the diesel release. I thought that a good place to start is with some follow-up comments from the town council meeting, if any of you saw or heard anything from it last night, regarding the status of the project, the amount of money expended, the way insurance is interacting with the town right now, and current outstanding invoices and a plan to deal with that. So the first thing to mention is that, as said earlier, the state delegation was there last night. They've expressed some interest in having further conversations to potentially see if the state has any funds anywhere for this type of issue. So there will be a meeting with some town officials that I'll be attending tomorrow at the Capitol with Representative Guerrera. So if and when anything comes out of that, I will absolutely update the board promptly. So, any conversations are good conversations. And thank you for crossing your fingers, Mr. Sylvia. We need that. So the next part of it is, we all already know we authorized the expenditure of $875,000 and change to pay the invoices, which were almost all the way through the month of January for the 2 major contractors related to the diesel release. I'm just for the benefit of the public that didn't tune in last night or is here, I'll kind of reiterate how that process worked for the board, where that money came from. So the Board of Ed has its operating budget, which is where we pay for teachers and instruction and supplies and things of that nature. The Board of Ed also has two other funds that are capital improvement related. So there is a town capital improvement fund and a Board of Ed capital improvement fund. And I'm going to talk about the Board of Ed related one. It's called the Public School CIP account, PSCIP. That account is where we house a number of different line items in it. There are budget line items for things like, and I actually have something that shows that, but alas, it's not in front of me. Oh, here we go. So there are things such as district-wide lighting improvements, bathroom renovations, playground renovations, furniture, technology, air conditioning, athletic improvements, painting, carpeting, kind of all of the maintenance activities you can think of for the school. There are line items in the public school CIP that deal with that. Money gets into the CIP account through several different means. The town charter establishes that $125,000 annually will be put in by the town council. It's what commonly referred to as the 125 account. The cap on the amount of money that we're allowed to have in there is $1.2 million, which was raised a couple years ago by the town. We asked for the cap increase in part so that we could intentionally try to raise the amount of money that we're keeping in there so we could take on larger projects, thereby alleviating the town from the need to fund us at a higher level in the town CIP account. And that's the account that traditionally is around $6.3 million, a mix of pay-as-you-go projects that are being done in the next year or two, and debt management, debt service, so paying off long-term bonds of 15, 20, 25 years. So think of school renovations go into that bond service, the police station when that was redone, and the town hall renovation that's going to happen. So back to our public school CIP account. Along with the $125,000 annual dollars from the town council, all receipts into the district go into there, or almost all receipts. That means anytime someone's renting our building, it goes into that account. When we get tuition paid for by students that are attending our schools that don't live in town, that goes in there. When we bill Hartford schools for special education services that we provide to open choice students, that money goes into that account. So that's how we build money into that account. Year after year, the money changes. It's part of the CIP program that we pass, and every year we estimate what we're going to spend on each of those accounts. So when the first set of invoices for $875,000 came to our attention, we had about $1.1 million in the public schools CIP account. All but $320,000 of that money was in line items in the public school CIP account. Once it's in a line item, we can transfer the money from line item to line item. One of the line items is underground storage tank removal. This qualifies as an expenditure to do that because there was some underground portion of it. We were short about less than $100,000 in designated funds. There's also an undesignated fund as money comes in throughout the year until the town council appropriates it to a certain line item. It sits undesignated and it can't be spent by us. Last night, the town council took action at our request to move the undesignated money in public school CIP into two areas. About $100,000 went into the underground storage tank, and $150,000 went into air conditioning repairs in order for us to be able to do the Martin Kellogg chiller that we've talked about for a while now. So the town council made that transfer. We're now able to pay the final invoices of that $875. It leaves us with $150,000 in system-wide air conditioning, which we expect to expend fairly soon. And there is a small portion, about $75,000, that is still undesignated. So that's how we paid for the initial invoices. It was all money that was already in a Board of Ed account. The town council made no additional appropriations. We spoke at our last meeting to authorize from this account because we felt it would have the least amount of impact on school operations, and we felt it was appropriate to do so. Quick question?
Not a question, just a clarification that the money in this account is not money that could be used for operating costs. So I don't want anyone to feel like we could have used that to hire teachers or to prevent layoffs last year.
There are very specific purposes that we can use it for. There's an amount of years and an amount of dollars that we can spend on a project. It has to be long-term and a certain $15,000 or $25,000, I forget. But we can't transfer that money into our operating budget. We can't use it to hire teachers. The only thing we can do it for is for maintenance-related items that are long-term in nature. Mr. Branda?
How long did it take us to get to the 1.1?
it's an accumulation
Yeah,
over
we
a
had,
couple of years.
so that got changed, let's see, Steve Woods was mayor, and that got changed years ago. They raised it from 450 to 1.2, and so it's taken us that, since he was mayor to accumulate
So
that.
about two years or so.
It's been longer
Lou,
than
do you
that.
have any more explanation on that?
Longer.
2 or 3 years?
Yes, I think it's been about three to 4 years.
3 to 4 years,
when that
yeah.
happened. Realistically, our receipts in any 1 year, including the 125,000 mandatory appropriation, will average somewhere between 3 and 400,000. So if we spent nothing, starting from zero, we probably can be close to the cap in 3 years.
And so I don't want to mince words that this has no effect on the Board of Ed. This means that a lot of those maintenance projects we were planning on doing through that account are on hold. That's the reality of the situation. The town is doing the same thing to backfill in state money that didn't come in this year. This is what we're doing to fill in the amount of money that needs to be expended on the diesel release. There is some money that's being held on the town side CIP that could potentially be used for some of these purposes at some point if that money's unfrozen. For instance, and this is something we've picked up on last week, the money for the Martin Kellogg chiller, 70% of that money is also housed on the town CIP side. The issue is we can't get to it right now because it's under a freeze. The need is current, so we are doing that need now. One other thing I was asked is on the list from last week, there were roof replacements, and the question was, well, isn't a roof more important than air conditioning because that's a safety hazard? And I did follow up on that, and our conversation at the table was that these are some leaks and some known issues that we will need to replace roofs, but there is no safety issues. There's no fear of the roof caving in anywhere in district right now. So if that was the case, it would get done immediately, and that would be an emergency for us. So I want to make sure people know that what we're putting off are maintenance related things. They are also some cosmetic things. So, the carpeting and paint in places that should be replaced may not be replaced for a year because of what's going on right now. This is the reason. So I just want to make that clear. So before we move on to the other items related to the diesel release, I just want to make sure everyone around this table at least is clear on how the money was expended, how much was expended, and where it came from. And I think we are all on the same page there. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is, as the town manager said last night in her report, and I've seen some of the emails come through from the insurance company, insurance has started paying out reimbursements, and we expect and hope that they will continue to do so. The town has $1 million policy per occurrence for this type of event, a pollution event. So at the current time, and Lou, you might have the exact number, but it's about $168,000 of the initial invoices that they have seen are being reimbursed. It's not 100% of what was given to them. There is still $700,000 or so that they are reviewing further. And Lou, if you can explain a little
Correct.
better, since you are, and I want everyone to know that Lou is one of the point people on this. So we are in constant communication with the insurance company and the town regarding how this is operating.
Correct. With the policy being $1 million with their $25,000 deductible, the town overall has the opportunity to recover $975,000 of funding. That's in conjunction with the funding potentially that the Board of Ed has already authorized through the public school CIP account. So you're approaching $2 million in total resources available, assuming the insurance company funds up everything they're obligated to do. Of the first payment, which all we have at this point is the commitment saying they are going to pay. They've made the determination on it. There's only about $8,000 of exclusions that they took out of the first 3 or 4 invoices that were brought in front of them. And so I would say it was around $175,000 to $180,000 was presented to them. They authorized $168,000 of it. We had $700,000 of additional invoices that went in batch number 2, which are currently under review. But with the development this week, I'm much more confident that it's very probable that we have a good chance of getting a substantial portion of that as payment number 2. The exact final cost of the whole project, just for discussion purposes, $2 million is a starting point. I would say even with exclusions that the insurance company could justify under their policy terms, I would say we have a very good chance of maxing out our $975,000 reimbursement that's available to us. So all that is wonderful news as far as, you know, minimizing the risk window that we have, because the project ultimately comes in at $2.5 million, where will the remaining $500,000 come from? It's $550,000. So with this development over the last few days, has worked out very well. The other part going forward is something called consent. So those of you who work in the insurance industry understand that the insurance company has a vested stake in how the process goes. They are not going to say, you guys do whatever you want and we'll just cut you a check. You know, they will want to see that we are meeting certain standards, we're using best practices, lowest cost measures to achieve these goals. And if we don't do that, they can withhold paying it, saying that you haven't received our consent and we're going to reserve our rights because we don't agree with your practices. So far, that doesn't, as of today, that does not seem like that's going to become a problem for the rest of the project. You know, we had a very good rapport meeting with a rep from the consulting firm that works with Chubb as the insurance company to ensure that the phasing proposals for the last 4 parts of the project will be in line with their expectations. So I'm very confident we're going to be able to do the fine-tuning to meet their expectations and take all the objections off the table for the best possible reimbursement determination for the town.
Mrs. Guyon?
Actually, I have 2 questions. When we talk about consent, and you said that's not going to be an issue, does that mean that we don't need to get consent, or that we are getting consent?
No, we need to get consent. Today, we met on phase 3, which is the demolition of the bus garage and the remediation efforts underneath the garage to finish that part, which is the biggest part of the work that's remaining. And the objection was that the insurance company was not happy with the itemization, the detailed proposals presented by the contractor, saying what they were going to do, what kind of equipment was going to be used, what's the process, how are you going to staff the job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All those real granular details of what a construction estimate are. They were presented with that this morning at the meeting. They said on the surface it looked good. You know, they certainly may have other questions or, you know, fine-tuning issues they see that they're not necessarily satisfied with. But the substance of the issue, that I would say we met at least 90% of the burden this morning for that. So we're only dealing with fringe issues now for the, you know.
So we are getting consent for what the work that's being done?
What we presented should allow us to achieve consent. I can't speak for the insurance company until I see the letter.
I just want to make sure we're doing our part on our end.
We're doing our part. You know, my job with this is to try to overcome objections by the insurance company, and I believe we've achieved that.
Okay, great. I have one other question. When you talk about exclusions, you said there's like $8,000 of exclusions. What types of things, what do they exclude for?
The charges for some of the professional support on the project, they were saying you could have had a lower cost technician do it instead of the higher cost senior environmental manager being on site for that. That may or may not be possible, and it's all in the rear view mirror now. You can't change history because it was work already done.
Going forward, though, is that something that we look at going forward, making sure that those people are the right level, that we don't have all?
Correct. The environmental person will make the practical decision if that's the most, the best in optimizing the operation, because certainly to downgrade the staff member, but then you pick up a lot of costs someplace else, doesn't really make sense.
Right.
So the goal is to try to get the project done as quickly as we can, as expediently and professionally supported to get the lowest cost outcome. So if it means we're going to incur a few dollars of exclusions, that's really not a bad choice.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mr. Sylvia?
So Lou, thank you for the explanation. If I was to, you know, try to convey a simple message out to the community, am I interpreting you correctly that the cost of the remediation is trending more towards $2 million versus the $5 million that came out in the beginning?
It appears that way.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brando?
Lou, last week we talked about the prompt payment terms and if that was settled, or is there any update on that?
Right. We paid the first invoices to the contractors without finalizing that arrangement.
Right.
The town had certain items they wanted to explore in more detail and thought there were additional opportunities available to the final negotiated amounts. So that's still on the table and being worked on.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
not settled.
So we're not held to a standard right now?
No,
Okay,
not
thank
yet.
you.
Dr. Braverman?
Lou, you had said batch one was 168,000 that we paid. Batch two, I didn't get the number.
I believe it was 708,000 in total, if I remember correctly.
So the two batches pretty much match up exactly to the 875 that we authorized to pay. And so one of the things that go alongside money coming back into the town through reimbursement are the procedural questions about how that works, where the money goes, is that money immediately spent to pay other bills, is insurance paying contractors directly? There are a plethora of questions, and since this really is only 2 days old at this point, there aren't perfect answers. It is on the top of my agenda, and Carol's nodding in the back of the room because I've bugged her about this already a couple of times. I've bugged Dr. Collins about it a couple of times to make sure no matter what happens, we're all on the same page that as things come in, no matter how procedurally, we're still able to make prompt payments to be able to get the kind of benefits that we've talked to the contractors about. So those conversations right now are in their infancy, but I expect quick decisions to be made on those grounds because money will actually be coming in soon. So we need to know exactly what's happening in terms of how things are going to be paid moving forward. And so those conversations are ongoing right now. By next week, by our next meeting next Wednesday, we should have an actual answer for how procedurally to continue moving forward.
If I may say, thank you, Josh, for the reassurance, and thank you, Ms. Ines. I appreciate the effort from the town council members. Thank you so much for the support. And I really do appreciate this level of explanation. It will provide our community with an excellent level of reassurance, and I'm feeling a little better. Thank you.
I think that's fair. And so the third piece of this is there are additional bills that have come into us, and Lou tells me they're about $120,000 to $125,000 of invoices that we've received. So there are payments to be made. There are payments coming in from insurance. No one is clear on the timing right now of how those intersect. In my conversation with Lou, and you can expand on this after, my conversation with Lou were that we don't need to do anything today. We don't need to send money out today. If we have these conversations and wait to see what the procedure looks like, come up with a very good plan of where we should pull money from next to be able to pay any bills, or if that's necessary right now, we can do that next Wednesday at our meeting, and then ask the town council, because they will need to take action no matter what for us, to take that action, and that gives us an opportunity to discuss with the town council what kind of action they're comfortable with, what will they approve, what appropriations are appropriate. So nothing is an immediacy right now. We have paid out a considerable amount, so the contractors are happy right now. They know they're getting paid. They know it will be prompt under any terms that we would agree to with them. And Lou, if you have anything to add on that.
You've covered it well. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on that kind of thing, Mr. Tufel?
Last week we talked about insurance, the investigation. We decide on whether we're going to go outside or insurance company do it. Is there any talk about that?
Right now, we can share that we have started an internal investigation on the board side. I haven't heard anything about insurance being interested in doing their own investigation. I'd be shocked if they pay out $1 million but don't follow up with any kind of investigation to see if there's a third party responsibility of any kind. And I don't know, Lou, if you've heard differently on that.
I have not heard a thing from the insurance company. There's been no mention, correspondence, or phone calls on that subject.
and I don't know if the town hasn't discussed starting anything yet in that regard. So, you know, it's certainly, I think it's one of the three places is going to have a full investigation. It's a matter of timing, and I think, you know, this is the reality of the situation. Everyone's been working on the town and board side 2 jobs right now because they've been full. I mean, I've seen these emails that are pouring through, and these are 1,000-word essays back and forth between the parties, and with a ton of information. So both sides have been focused on the cleanup, which I think is appropriate as a first stage because everything that led up to the incident is not going to change based on immediate rash action. The one thing we can do is clean it up and pay for it in a responsible way. So, you know, the board is starting to do an investigation. You know, when that is complete, there will be information to share from it. The town may choose to do an investigation. The insurance company, I'd be shocked if they don't. But you never know what they do and don't do. One other thing, Lou, that I would like you to discuss is we talked about the additional phases that are going on that you met with them about. And if you can break down, because I know there are a few different parts of this. There's the bus garage, there's Garfield Street, and then there's actually an MDC and storm drain component of this.
Okay. Yes, sir. The way the project has evolved, there's actually 6 distinct aspects to it for phases. Phases A and B were the immediate response. Phase A going from the spill location where the tank was in that general area, addressing any issues that compromised the brook. And then you had the other part was the prep all along Garfield Street, you know, the last 15, 20 feet, because there was significant, you know, technical finessing that needed to be done so they wouldn't undermine the road by, you know, not going through a very fine and, you know, supported type of, you know, excavation and supporting activities that's there. So that work is essentially done at this point for sections A and B. Part C is what started today with the demolition of the bus garage. So the building had its environmental health check week and a half ago. That came back fine. So they took all the walls down today. The building has had its power transferred, and any features in the building were removed prior to demolition. Okay. All that is considered clean fill at this point. So the hope is that can be pulverized and then tossed back into the site as part of the fill requirements that are needed to reestablish the final condition. Part D, which is the next major phase, is the final choices of what they're going to do on Garfield Street. There is some what they call free product that is underneath the road. The town has several options available as far as how they'd like to approach it. They can take the road and demo it, take it down and get everything out, or they can put in a long-term blocking system where you basically build like a concrete retaining wall around the edges to prevent any of the diesel fuel that's currently there to migrate down to the brook. And then you would need a well pumping system that, as the product moves or migrates over the years, can be extracted and can be monitored if there is any of that sort of, I wouldn't call it, it's not a release, it's really just being able to pull it out of the area under the road and leave the road intact. You know, the cost benefit of each is kind of a toss-up. You know, if you go in and do the, you know, demo the road, take it down to the roadbed, do what you need to do underneath to clean it up, then it's done, it's over. You have 1 to 2 year monitoring that's required just to catch all the seasons of the year to make sure there's no issues. But after that 2-year period, the project would be considered over, and, you know, required monitoring would stop at that point. If you went with the retaining wall system with the extraction pumps, you would have to get to the standard of that would meet the state DEP regulations, where it would be considered a clean site again after a certain amount is extracted, and there's no telling how many years that would take. So you have the choice of more upfront cost to get a conclusive outcome compared to a more limited response where you have, you know, potential many years of follow-up maintenance work that needs to occur to monitor that. That decision is being, evaluated every day the last, week or two. And, the final decision will happen in short order here as far as which approach would be more favorable for us to take based on, some of the test results and recommendations and what DEP will support us doing. The other two phases, Phase E, is the collateral work along the northwest side of the site, which is where the MDC sewer line is. That's really the boundary of where the release is, because their sewer pipe had a gravel base, and that really was the last place product was captured there. So MDC agreed to come and do a temporary relocation of the pipe. So all the individuals who were being serviced off that sanitary line, kept their service, allowed the contractor to do the excavation work that he needs to do to take out any contamination there, and then putting the MDC pipe back to where previous loads or wherever they agreed to doing it. I have not checked to see exactly the status of that. I know the work was started. I'm not absolutely sure if they've actually finished everything, although I know MDC has primarily vacated the site, so if they're not 100% done, they're probably 95% done with what they need to do. And then the last part is, as it approaches the creek that comes from the waterfall and then joins and goes behind Town Hall, there is a storm drain system that was up there that needed to be replaced because of what went on. And that's the last part of the job, was really very small in comparison to the rest of it. So overall, we have to characterize the job as approaching 2/3 done overall as far as the magnitude of the remediation work, although we're probably in the 50% range for overall cost, maybe better than that. I know one of the very positive developments is there is the possibility of a local contractor being able to provide clean fill to go back in that site that dovetails from a timing standpoint very well with us. So the less we need to handle and truck numerous truckloads of fill here for the site is going to be a tremendous cost savings to the overall project. So that was a very favorable development that's going on. So, and I guess to make sure everybody's clarified it. I mean, at this point, I would, my personal opinion, based on what I've seen, we're probably looking at the $2 million to a top of $2.5 million for the range of the final project cost. But certainly we have some good things happening, which may allow that number to come down from there.
Mr. Brandon.
Regarding Garfield, does Chubb have any say as to which direction we have to go, as to whether or not we demo the road? How does that work? Do they have any?
The answer is they'll have some say, but it's more on practice as far as how we're doing it.
Okay.
If we make the determination it's in our best interest for the community to do that, they won't stand in the way of that.
So their requirement of the practice, though, could also determine which path you take.
We'll only pay for these sorts of things to be done.
Right.
We won't pay for the building of the wall. So we don't agree with that methodology.
Okay.
We want you to take it out. If you take it out, we'll pay for it. If you don't take it out, well, we're going to reassess our position.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
I have a couple of conclusory remarks on these kind of topics, and then certainly entertain any other questions and discussion. First, I do realize that I may have been remiss over our last couple of meetings. Our meetings have concerned solely financial impacts from the DESER release. As a board, and it's my responsibility to do so, we have not extended our apologies for any role that the Board of Ed and its staff has had in this event in town. We've certainly all been feeling that and expressing that personally. I've been remiss in not making any public statements about that. It goes without saying that everyone in the organization feels horrific that this is something that's happening. It's not something anyone wants to happen. It's not something that we want to affect the town or affect our students. Unfortunately, it did happen, and right now we're trying to deal with it the only way that we can at this point, which is figuring out the best way to pay for things, taking on that as our responsibility, and doing everything we can to make sure this is going to impact our taxpayers as least as possible. So I do want to make that. I personally apologize for not representing the board well enough to make that statement earlier when it happened. I will do better. Next, there's certainly been frustration in the community for our lack of discussion about the actions leading up to the diesel release, to discuss our personnel. As we all understand around the table, we have responsibilities to our personnel in the organization that are several-fold. We have legal obligations, we have privacy obligations. We do not have a final investigation determining anything on anything that happened, although there are things that are out there in the public. We also have had several executive sessions. We're going to have one this evening to continue discussing as a board our personnel and things that go along with that. Unfortunately for the public, we have no other comments to make in that regard. As a body, we agreed with the town council that information related to these actual actions should go through the town attorney, Ben Ancona. We won't have any further public comment until the time is appropriate to do so. Along with that, I have released a couple of public statements on our board website, which I hope people have seen, to put in writing exactly what has happened. When appropriate, I will continue to do so. I don't think it will be necessary right now since we're not really taking any action. I did, at the town council meeting last night, request that the town manager or town attorney or anyone from the town side release an updated press release about all of the specifics that Lou just kind of went over in terms of the phasing, the amounts expended, the insurance coming back. I hope that there will be some time, obviously everyone's very busy dealing with this, but there will be some time to put something like that together from the town because, they're kind of controlling that information. So hopefully that can get put out there for the public to have an update on that information. One last thing I wanted to add is that the town manager in her remarks last night said that it's her hope and goal to have all of this work done by the end of the current month, by the end of February. That would be excellent. I think we would all like to see it done, cleaned, and paid for. That way we can move on to the other pressing issues that are facing our town and to consider the other issues related to the release that aren't emergency in nature. So that is kind of the time frame for everything that's going on. The board is now updated with all the information that I have that you may not have had before. Are there any further questions, comments on this, Mr. Sylvia?
Comment, Josh, I just want to thank you for representing us and extending our deepest appreciation.
Anyone further before we move on?
I just want to say that we are in the middle of an investigation. We have been for quite some time, and so therefore I really can't speak about it, but I do want to publicly apologize to Alan, Aaron, and Dennis because I believe that their names were brought up publicly. It was certainly never meant to be discussed or made public. There was no determination been made. They hadn't been spoken to. It's not the way we do business, and it's very unfortunate that happened the way it did, so I want to apologize publicly to the three of them because no determination has been made whatsoever.
And I'd like to just jump in and echo the exact same comments as Dr. Collins, that, since I was a major spokesperson on the tape and things I said, that the embarrassment and professional, bad feelings that came with that are something I've got to work to earn back their trust and respect, and I certainly intend to do my best at that. Thank you.
Mr. Brandon, do you have something?
Yeah, really quick. Thank you both for saying that, but just to turn it a little bit to what you said, Josh, in terms of not an emergency, I think it's good to point out too, I think it was Mr. Bowles and Mr. Alexander who wanted us to really focus on the never again, right? Like, what are we going to do procedurally? And I think it's important for the public to know that that's part of these discussions. It's just in terms of the emergency, we're focused on cleanup, and so that's part of the process.
That's a very good point, and I certainly didn't include that, but was thinking that that's part of the discussions that we're having about policies and procedures from a board side to look at our entire operation, because this is one thing that happened. We want to make sure this kind of event doesn't happen in any part of our operation. So it is something that Dr. Collins has started sharing with me about what they've been looking at, and kind of everything in the operation was due for a refresh and had been ongoing before this release, and it continues on. So
really quick, just a question. I know when Mr. Sylvia brought up the committee in terms of consolidation and all those ideas, but the discussion of the committee with our two bodies, I know you said you were going to meet with the mayor about that. Is that specific to the release or what Mr. Sylvia was talking, or
That
everything?
wasn't specific to a joint committee. We have essentially had a joint committee, just without a formal name.
Right.
I'm going to be meeting with some town councilors over the weekend as well to continue discussions, and the timing of everything hasn't worked out for a formal thing, but it is
Okay. I just wanted to be sure because he mentioned
ongoing, and the phone calls are obviously flying back and forth between all of us and all of them. Is there anything further on the diesel release? Okay, seeing none, as we move into public participation, I just want to point out for folks in the room that we've intentionally moved this above the bottom of our agenda. We do have an executive session as the last piece of our agenda before adjournment. So we will take public comments now on any matter, followed by board member remarks, and then we'll move into our executive session, which will be the last public portion of our meeting besides us coming back into session for 25 seconds to adjourn. With that, we'll move on to public participation on any matter related to board responsibilities. Our phones are open at 860-665-8736. Prachi and Matt, if you can just slide, and then whoever comes up, if we can get a chair just for anyone else is coming up.
I'm fine. Thank you. Mady Kenny, 53 Crestview Drive. As a member of the public, I would really like to thank you for your comments the last 5 minutes. They were gracious and responsible. I would like to take the opportunity to remind the public that that is a two-way street. And some of the public comments and the Facebook vilification has been pretty strong, and you need to be sure that your comments are based in fact, not emotion. I would go back to a session years ago, about 20 years ago, during a budget session when a member of the public got up and was castigating the Board of Ed for their budget and suggested that Muriel Scholar, who was head of the board at the time, take a cut in pay. She obviously had not realized that Muriel was a volunteer. The other comment I'd like to make is I know you're busy now with budget and the cleanup, but I was wondering whether you've been talking at all about replacing the bus garage, and where, when we first started the town hall renovation, that was a run your knickers up the flagpole issue about building a new bus garage and possibly over Alumni Road. I'm not sure whether you're even thinking of that at this point, but I believe, Dr. Collins, you mentioned at one point that the longevity of the buses was significantly impacted by their having shelter during inclement weather. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kenny.
Thank you.
Any further members of the public? And our phone line is open at 860-665-8736. We'll just give it a second in case anyone wants to call in. Seeing no members of the public coming forward and no phone calls. Oh, we go. Can you? Hello?
Hi, is this the Board of Ed?
Yes, it is, Rose.
Okay, it's Rose Lyons, 46 Elton Drive. And the phone number showing on the bottom of the screen is 860-667-8736, which I dialed 3 times, and they said it was disconnected. So I should know better because I've dialed this number so many times. I should have it on speed dial. But I just thought I'd bring that to the attention of NCTV, that maybe they can correct it so anybody trying to call in calls the right number. I just wanted to echo what Mady has said. I've said it on Facebook myself. I've said it in public. A lot of the misinformation going around, I also put at the hands of the town attorney and the town manager. I find that the Board of Ed has been very forthcoming and very prompt and responsive to any questions I've had. I asked questions of the town manager, and other than the last line of an email where she gave me my answer, the first part of it was that I could Google Channel 16 and watch the program quite honestly, I didn't appreciate that. So I want to thank you all for being so, what I feel is honest with me as a resident asking questions, and I urge anyone that's asking these questions on Facebook to go to the next meeting and ask them straight to the superintendent and to the board rather than speculating as to what is going to happen and what has happened. And thank you once again. Appreciate all your efforts.
Rose, can you hang on?
Can I hang up?
Can you hang on?
Oh, yes.
Did the graphic change?
No.
Okay.
It's still 860-667-8736.
Might take a little while. Thank you, Rose.
Okay, bye-bye.
For anyone that is watching and wants to call in, 860-665-8736. I assume our awesome volunteers at NCTV are making a fix right now, so here's John. Hello?
Hi, is this the town council? I mean, the Board of Ed, I'm sorry.
You're on. Would you prefer the town council? Because I can arrange that.
No.
You're on with the board. Go ahead, Mr. Bashan.
Sorry about that. The number that you're showing on the screen is different than the one you're giving out verbally, so you're giving out the right one. The one on the screen is not the right one.
We just heard. Go ahead.
56 Maple Hill Avenue. Along the lines of the never again notion, does the board, I was just curious if the board maintains any other bulk petroleum storage facilities or tanks on any of the properties? In other words, heating oil tanks underground, any other underground tanks that you're aware of? And if there are, has anything been done to secure them or to test the areas around them? And I'll hang up now. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
And we will get him an answer and share that with the board as well.
Right, that's part of the investigation as far as what the fuel dispensing stations. We only have just the one. The others are just the underground storage tanks, which we've all known about, the oil tanks. But fuel dispensing tanks is one that is shared with the town, and that's at the source of the issue.
I'm just going to say the phone number one more time, 860-665-8736. Different than the graphic, unless it's been changed already.
I would just like you to, I fear, get a formal response for Mr. Bashan, just because we all know about the fuel tanks. Yes, we do, but clearly he does not. So if you can just get him some more information, that'd be great.
You're on with the board.
Hi, Josh. Patty Foley.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. This is Patty Foley, 51 Crown Ridge. I heard yes, and I see the telephone number. May I also ask that when you put this on your public participation, when you leave it there on your agenda, you might also print the phone number there?
That's a very good idea.
Thanks. And interesting meeting. I'm still absorbing. I'll come up with a question to be sure shortly. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Just going to give the phone number one last time because it's actually when I was vice chair and Dr. Finkelstein missed a meeting, I think he told me 15 times to say the number, but Rose is back. You're on with the board again, Rose.
I know I'm only supposed to get one chance, but Mrs. Guyan mentioning giving Mr. Bashan a written confirmation of what you just spoke about with the tanks. It was common practice in the past to respond to public participation with a follow-up letter. I have not been to Board of Education meetings in a while. Is that still the practice? If you ask a question, you will get a written response, or at least a thank you for coming. Yes. We'd like to address your problem, but it's not our problem. It's the police department's problem. I'm just curious because I've been saying how great you were about doing that, and I often ask the town council to do that. People come, ask questions, and some questions are answered and others aren't. They're avoided. So just a question for you, and if you're not, maybe it's a good time to think about doing it if you have the staff to do it. Thank you.
We still do that, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, one last time, 860-665-8736. What I'm going to do is we'll start board remarks, and if someone calls in, I'm just going to cut one of you off and take the phone call. Who would like to start first? Bob, please.
I appreciate the student reps' input and their opinion on the classroom sizes for the AP classes, and also their report on the school district. I think you guys did a heck of a job. Congratulations.
Mr. Branda?
I was just going to say, I think last week you were really nice to myself and Ms. Strohs, so I'm going to return that favor. And I think that the way that I've heard you talk about Dr. Finkelstein and others, I fully expect that that's how some of us are going to talk about you. And I think that we are all very lucky in this town to have somebody who's willing to take the time and explain what's going on. And hopefully, I know I'm learning on the job, as some say, but I feel very lucky to be learning at this table. And I hope that everybody's paying attention. And when it gets uploaded to NCTV, I hope those with questions watch it, because I think today gave out a lot of great information. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brandon. Mrs. Strohs? Mrs. Guyan also has nothing.
Hilarious. I wanted to say thank you to everybody here. I feel like this was a very productive meeting. I think there was a lot of great discussion. It gives me a lot to think about. Matt and Prachi, thank you for your input. I appreciate your staying here. I know it's getting late, and we all get tired, so I can only imagine what it's like for you guys. But I really, truly appreciated your being here and your input. I think that you added a lot to the conversation. And I had one other thing I wanted to say. Oh, just to kind of piggyback off of what you just said, is that having the explanations, I think, is really helpful. This is my third go-around, and there's still stuff that I pick up from meeting to meeting. There's things that I think that I understand, and then we talk about it more, and I get a better understanding. So if you're at home and you have a question and you...
Emily, you're cut off.
Okay.
You're on with the board, Mr. Bichon.
Yeah, sorry, just to follow up on that question, I'm grateful that you're letting me do that. I didn't necessarily need a written response. And I might not have made the question clear. I'm concerned if we do have other tanks in the ground, have they been looked at recently, or how recently they've been looked at to make sure there's no other, leaks going on, which I wouldn't anticipate, but just out of an abundance of caution.
It's
have they been checked recently?
It's worthwhile to have a full written response regarding what other operations we have and how we look at them and how things have changed since. So that's certainly something the board is very curious about as well. So we will get something to you.
Okay, but in general, if you could just maybe give a couple of words on that, if they've been looked at recently. That's all. Thank you.
The answer is yes, but you'll get a fuller response. Thank you. You were finished?
Yeah, almost finished. Just to say, we appreciate it when the public calls in and asks questions, and just don't be afraid to call and ask. If you have something, please call and ask and get information right from us. I think that's the best way.
I'd say also send us emails, phone calls, anything. Dr. Braverman.
I'd like to say thank you to Prachi and Matt. You guys did great reports, and you're our eyes and ears, so it's wonderful to have you here to give us the hands-on first eye evaluation, so thank you for that. And I'd like to say, sometimes a negative event like this is sort of the fuel spill. Negative, but I think it's having some positive outcomes in that we're working with the council and the board together, and maybe that's a model for future endeavors as we go forward. So, thank you. Thank you to the council. Carol.
Thank you. Mr. Vasella?
I was just going to say that I also thought tonight's meeting was very informative. It was very open, good discussion. Thank you guys for coming in. I think it's the first time, my 5th year on the board, it's the first time we've ever had any participation from our representatives, and I just think it's great. So thank you all, and keep it going. Thank you.
Mrs. Stam?
I too want to say I totally and thoroughly appreciated the insight you gave to us tonight. It was just really appreciated. It's great to hear from you and what you feel out there. And if you're going to go back to school tomorrow and hear more stuff, come back and let us know about that because we really want to hear that information. I want to ditto, Josh, the leadership has been great, and I really appreciate all that. I appreciate me being able to comfortably call you, comfortably ask you a question that I don't understand, and thoroughly go, like the way the budget's going this year, it's been so much more easier for me to understand and follow, and I totally appreciate that because I know that you asked for certain things for that to happen, and it's happening, and I appreciate the effort that the administration is doing with that too. I do want to go see Beauty and the Beast. I really do. I'm hoping that doesn't going to interfere with what I'm going on to. I was at the Wallace PAC meeting last night, and I just need to reiterate, for all those PAC committees at all those schools, I am so impressed with like your willingness to like just give to the schools, and not just the kids, but the teachers, and Wallace especially was like really, just right, spot on. The teachers were asking for something and there was no question in their mind, and they were like, yep, we have the money, here you go. And I just totally want everyone to know, as a Board of Ed and as myself, I totally appreciate all those efforts that all those PAC committees do at every school for those kids. And I'll stop at that point, but I do want to say, hey, happy Valentine's Day.
Mr. Sylvia?
Where to start? I really want to say that over the last 2 years that I've been on this board, this particular meeting has met every single expectation I have ever wanted. And Josh, I thank you because I believe it's really your leadership and your style and approach, your openness and your candor in helping to keep this board open. And I welcome that completely. I think with that type of open dialogue, there's a great sharing of information, and it will help rebuild the community's understanding of what we're trying to accomplish for the students. And I wanted to thank you for that. On this end of the table, you guys are amazing. Now, I'm piling on, all right? I know you're supposed to be doing your physics class, whatever you're doing, and that other AP course you're in, and I know you're up late. But I have to pile on with what they're saying is your perspective and input to us keeps it real and gives us reminds us why we're here, and we get your perspective. It's important. And as it was said earlier, the more information you can bring back from the other students, heck, bring the students with you. I don't care. But it's a matter that you're that important to us, and I really appreciate your effort. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sylvia. I have two discrete issues. That's actually a really good point. Do the two of, and do you have anything to add? As board members around the table, Matt, do you have anything?
Oh,
and you don't have to.
Oh, sure. Well, happy Valentine's Day. And I do want to say I really have enjoyed this meeting as well. I think that I'm always amazed as to how receptive all of you are and how appreciative you all are of students' input in different issues. And I also agree that it's very important, and I'm very appreciative of it. So thank you.
Prachi, anything?
I'll add to that. I appreciate your inclusiveness of us, and I think that if we were sitting at the table over there, we'd probably be less likely to contribute to the conversation. And I'm also glad that you find our opinions
valued.
Valuable, yeah, valuable. I don't know the word. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. I have two discrete things to say. First, because you all piled onto the student reps, I will issue my famous challenge to you. There's an expectation for what you're going to bring to the table now. It's to have appropriate comments when you think they're going to add value to the conversation. It's to learn as much as you can from the process, and it's to talk to your student body and bring back the opinions that you feel are representative of your school. We know you can do it. We've seen that in other students, and they just haven't had the opportunity. You have the opportunity, make it count, and pave the way for other students to have the same opportunities moving forward. So that's the challenge. I refuse to compliment you any more than you've been complimented tonight. The other discrete point I'll make tonight is that in our board packets this evening, there is a memo on an issue that happened at Anna Reynolds over the last couple of weeks. It is on our agenda as a discussion item for next week. It's an issue that we've encountered before, either there or at another school, where there is material from the inner part of the roof in the gym coming down. Because of the nature of that in this day and age, the gym was shut for a couple of days, for a week. There was an actual environmental test performed to determine if there was anything harmful in the kind of dust, almost, I kind of think of it as confetti coming down from the ceiling. There is nothing harmful. For any parents at Anna Reynolds that had any concerns, we will be discussing this fully at a board meeting next week. We didn't have time to get it on the agenda for tonight. But please know that your students are in no danger of any kind. There is nothing heavy, sharp, or large coming down from the ceiling or will come down from the ceiling. We have repaired some tiles that were on the floor. There may be some pictures floating around of things. There is no danger to anyone. No one is in any harm's way, anything like that. We'll discuss more, and if something hasn't gone out to the parents of that community, I'm sure something will from the principal, at least to make sure everyone's on the same page there. But it's a not a big deal thing. I want to make sure everyone knows that because information's getting out there. So we will discuss more fully next week. At this point, we have finished our public agenda. I will ask for a motion to move into executive session to discuss central office personnel. Moved by Mrs. Guyon, second by Dr. Braverman. Any discussion on the matter? All in favor? Aye. And we are officially in executive session.